Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Today I have a very special guest discussing the important topic of Christian nationalism. I'm here with Brother Isa, and the issue of Christian nationalism has really come to the fore in political discourse in America, where you have a rising tide of right-wing nationalism that says that the US is a Christian nation, and therefore there's not really a place for Muslims or non-Christians. And we want to analyze that from a historical basis. Were the founding fathers actually intending to have a Christian nation as such? And in order to answer this question, I've brought on Brother Isa here, who is going to help us look at the history. He's done a lot of research, mashallah, on this question. Brother Isa, I'll let him introduce himself, but he's actually an American convert to Islam. As far as I can tell, he's white. So he has a lot of experience actually discussing and debating with Christians, his own family. Actually, I'll have Brother Isa tell us more about his background now before we get into the actual presentation, inshallah. So how are you doing, brother?
Alhamdulillah, everything's great. I really appreciate you for having me on and asking me to do this. I didn't realize until you asked me how much I had put into this topic. It's been longer than I've been a Muslim, like maybe getting close to 20 years that I've been in some ways arguing against Christian nationalism. And just for the background for this specific topic, my hometown, it's an area of Texas which unfortunately still had like lynchings and KKK presence or white nationalist compounds and things like this. And this was on the far extreme, but the average person is Christian nationalist. That's the normal person there. So growing up and then reading about these, loving and cherishing my heritage in some ways as a kid, looking into them made me understand the true political philosophy that made this country, and then the intentions maybe of the founding fathers. And in some ways, actually, it was very introspective for me to look through all of this material, because I realized how much this had an effect on me, seeing how they related to Christianity, and then how I started to form my own opinions, and that led me to Islam eventually. Alhamdulillah.
So you're seen as basically a race traitor.
To some people, yeah, I've gotten that comment quite a bit, yeah. But to be fair, I mean, not my. I know you mentioned my debating with my family, but my family don't view me this way. They're very, very good people. So, okay, yeah. But I have gotten that comment. I've had people try to fight me in just for finding out that I'm Muslim in my hometown, and I get that all the time online. First, they think that I'm brown. They think like, what's this brown guy doing telling me about my country?
It's because of your beard. It's because you have this very luscious black beard.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they just don't get out enough. They don't have enough friends, so they don't know that people from the British Isles could be, have black hair. So
yeah, maybe that's the problem. Yeah, so I mean, this is increasingly common discourse we see from figures like Matt Walsh. Maybe even Tucker Carlson engaging in this, Nick Fuentes and his Groypers. They have this perception or this claim that the U.S. is a Christian nation, and therefore there is no place for Muslims to really practice publicly. At least they have a big problem like with prayer in Times Square. They have a big problem with Muslims being open about their religious rituals or their religious beliefs. They keep saying we don't want Muslims to stuff Islam down our throats. And so these are the things that have really ignited a lot of debate and angry sentiment and hostility against Muslims. Muslims are getting attacked if they dare to express themselves or pray publicly. Literally, we've seen many incidents in the past 6 months of Muslims getting attacked during their prayers if they're at a park or even Times Square or wherever. So this is something that I think deserves more scrutiny from an academic historical perspective, and that's why I brought on Brother Isa, who has done so much research on this. And as you'll see, it's a lot of interesting facts about what the founding fathers of America actually believed about Islam, what they believed about Christianity, what they believed about Christian nationalism as such. So that's what we're going to get to, inshallah. And this is a slide presentation that we're going to go through and discuss.
I should say also, since it's relevant to the topic, I spent a lot of time as a kid. I have a very politically active family, So I spent a lot of time with right-wing congressmen or state representatives, and like hearing from them or watching from their side. I actually used to live right down the road from Ron Paul. He would
Yeah.
bike by our house. Yeah, he's a nice man. And then as a Muslim, I've done a lot of the Muslim advocacy days on Capitol Hill and then in Austin. So I've met with, and then in private settings too as well. I've met with senators and congressmen and gotten to see a little bit about the inside of that while I also process the political theory. So inshallah, I can come with some insights that can help provide context to the conversation, and maybe some ammunition for these people who are going against Islam so hard. So the title here is Monotheism Made America. I wanted to have a positive kind of title, but the underlying critique is of Christian nationalism. So I wanted to provide a good off ramp for them, build a bridge before really tearing down the walls, and not only refute their narrative, but also show the actual historical and philosophical narrative.
Yeah, because ultimately we want to invite non-Muslim Americans, Christians to Islam. So like that's the kind of vision you have in mind. This is the dawah that you have in mind. And this is the case that you're going to make, inshallah. So let's go to the first slide.
Yeah, inshallah. So I'll go through just a quick introduction of the kind of main intention of the Founding Fathers with Christian nationalism, or with Christianity, and with the religious diversity in the country. And then Islam in America, showing that Islam is compatible with Western civilization, and that, in fact, Christianity was, throughout most of its history, incompatible with Western civilization, and was a destructive factor in Western civilization. But then how during the Renaissance and Enlightenment, you had people countering a lot of the presuppositions of Christianity, and rebuilding a society without these negative ideas. Then to the main critique, or the most controversial part, is what the Founding Fathers themselves had to say about Christianity and the Bible, and what the Bible says that's against American ideals, or really just human ideals, and how Muslims can interact in the marketplace of ideas with our political theory, bringing our political theory to the front rather than just acting as a victim minority. Okay. So beginning, of course, as all good things, with the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O people of the book, let us come to common terms that we will worship no one but Allah, associate none with him, nor take one another as lords instead of Allah. But if they turn away, then say, bear witness that we have submitted to Allah alone. Now, subhanAllah, firstly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites us to good relations, coming to common terms, not pushing them away. So this is unlike what the Jews have, for example, with their prophecies of Edom. They think that Edom, or Rome, is the eternal enemy of the Jewish people, that they have to subvert and fight throughout all time. And they believe in two messiahs, because originally Judaism had two eschatological figures, which were eventually fulfilled by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Isa alayhi salam, Jesus. But the Jews now, because these prophecies have already been fulfilled, they have to repackage them in order to fit their current narrative, their current, strategy. So they say that one of their prophets is going to come and destroy the Ishmaelites, and Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David is going to come and destroy Edom, destroy Rome, and enslave the whole world to them. So this is the exact opposite what Islam has. It's not a subversive force within society. Our goal is to act positively within society and bring people to an equitable middle ground. And I also want to point out an amazing thing, Sadaqah Allahul Azim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says monotheism, or associating no one with Allah, and taking lords other than Allah. And this could be, the whole presentation could just be tafsir of this one verse, because of how deep of a critique this is of Christian society. And in accordance with the last point, we see in the life of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet, may Allah have mercy upon all of them, accept all of them. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ praised certain good qualities of the Romans, like helping the poor and needy, being getting back up on their feet after falling down, and then putting resistance to the oppression of the kings. So certain aspects of the people of Rome were praised by the Sahaba, and this goes to show again that they are not the Rome or Western civilization, from the eyes of a Muslim, they're not incompatible. As far as we don't have embedded hatred within our religion towards the Europeans or European consciousness. So to begin with, just a very quick introduction or overview, we have Thomas Jefferson. People ask if Islam is compatible with Western civilization. People ask if Christianity, if America is a Christian nation. Well, Thomas Jefferson said that Christianity neither is nor ever was a part of the common law. John Adams said in his Treaty with Tripoli that the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. James Madison said that every new and successful example of separation of church and state should be implemented so that they can be more pure when they're not mixed together. And of course, this all is exemplified within the First Amendment, that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So that's the simple, politically correct, easy answer for whether or not America is a Christian nation. But as we go, inshallah, we'll get to the more
that's pretty explicit, right? Before we move on, it's pretty explicit that they're saying it's not in any sense founded on the Christian religion.
Yeah, in every single way. So then what is it founded on? That's the question that, a lot of people hopefully should look into. And whenever I looked into it, I found that it was actually mostly reconstructed from Greco-Roman law. And this is exemplified also in the architecture of DC. It's all Greco-Roman architecture. So you see here, the Aristotelian politics, you have a tripartite breakdown of society or political authority into rule of the one, rule of the few, rule of the many. And then this became developed into a mixed constitution system through Rome. And at the time of Cicero, it was a mixed constitution. And Cicero came as I always thought he was just a Stoic philosopher or something, but he's actually probably the most important of the philosophers for the founding of America. He has in his quotes about God and God's giving us a good innate nature, and giving us reason from his truth, and with that reason, encouraging us to do good, enjoin good, and forbid evil. I'm not joking. Actually, some of the translations say enjoining good and forbidding evil. I'm reading and I'm like, wait, am I reading like a Muslim scholar here? It's like Allah has given you an aql and given you the fitrah, and he has persuaded you to amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. It's like, wow, this is he was a BC guy, so I don't know if he was maybe prophetic or something. Allahu alam about any of that. But it's pretty clear that this was the formula. You could rebuild American society or rebuild the American political theory just from Cicero and Aristotle and Plato and the like. And this is in contravention to the Christian doctrine of original sin. This idea of a good innate nature, because natural law is not the law of the jungle. Natural law is that you have within yourself a standard that's set just like the standards of gravity or these other laws of nature, and that from this standard we can perceive the what's right and wrong for society. And this was the point that Cicero made, and it's not from a Judeo-Christian perspective, as some would say. It's not that he says that men are made in the image of God. You could say that the giving an innate nature and giving us reason is making us in some way in the image of God. So it's like a parallel. That's a very good argument, but that's not where the founding fathers got that idea from or derived their ideas from. And on the point that I mentioned of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning original or the lords over us, you see, whenever you have a society or even a family structure, if you have an authority who thinks that the people underneath them are actually innately evil and need to be suppressed, well then you're just it's like Stanford Prison Experiment on steroids. You're just asking for them to oppress and repress. And you see this even in some families. I've seen this in churches, that the preachers will be saying, children, you gotta beat the devil out of them. You gotta, God gave them all that meat on their backside. You gotta light it up to show them the fear of God. And it's like, I'm looking around as a kid, I'm like, maybe, did you ever think you're the evil one and the kids are good? Maybe you got it backwards. Turns out he eventually like got caught with a little girl in the. So he was the evil one. He was the evil one, and the kids were good, innocent ones.
It's gotta put a lot of meat on that backside.
Oh my goodness, yeah. He was talking a little bit too much about it, I think.
Okay, let's next slide.
So then, also in this introduction, dealing with the question of Islam in America, or America, in Islam, if America were to become a Christian nation or something. It's not like this was outside of the range of understanding of the founding fathers. They weren't totally ignorant to the fact that there were, at that time, probably hundreds of millions, or that like a sizable percentage of the population followed a different religion, even in Europe. And when they spoke about it, Benjamin Franklin said, if the Mufti of Constantinople were to send a missionary to preach Mohammedanism to us, he would find a pulpit at his service. Imagine somebody saying that about like the Ayatollah or something, or like the Mufti of Saudiya or something.
Yeah.
And Thomas Jefferson, he's quoting John Locke here, but he says, within the mantle of its protection, the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Mohammedan, the Hindu and the infidel of every denomination. So this deals with Islam. And then in general, the overall intention, George Washington says, the bosom of America is open to receive not only the opulent and respectable stranger, but the oppressed and persecuted of all nations and religion, who we shall welcome to a participation of our rights and our privileges, if by decency and propriety of conduct they appear to merit the enjoyment. So this is not only like the student H-1B visas or the Trump gold card holders. This is also refugees. It's not a Jewish conspiracy to allow refugees and like a modern Jewish conspiracy. It's within the founding fathers' intentions themselves to allow safe haven for individuals who come for safe haven.
But it also says, to play devil's advocate, if by decency and propriety of conduct they appear to merit the enjoyment. So it is merit-based as well.
Oh yeah, so I think originally they had like their system was like you can come and stay. And I think it was originally for whites, but you can come and stay, and then after like a few years, if you don't commit any crimes, then you would become a citizen or something like that. So this was like a time period that was allotted to them, that if they come and they're good citizens, then they would become like naturalized. So that's changed recently, but I think they had a certain system like that.
Yeah, because I mean, would you agree that some of the people who are coming into the U.S. or some of these other countries, they're not really?
Oh yeah, I'm not talking about people who are just like sneaking in just to make a buck or sell drugs or something.
Yeah, actual criminals. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty explicit. The pulpit. So Benjamin Franklin, if we understand this quote properly, would be fine with the Mufti of Constantinople or Istanbul coming to Times Square.
Yeah, what would
and
a
preaching,
Times Square be? Yeah.
On a missionary, like as a missionary. That means like proselytization. So Benjamin Franklin apparently didn't have this concept of, oh, you're shoving the religion down our throats, keep it to yourself, keep it to the mosque.
But you know what's funny? He did have some anti-immigrant rhetoric. Oh. He was talking about the Palpatine hordes who are coming to our nation and changing our culture. Talking about the Germans. Oh, so the Germans were the third world Palpatine hordes that were coming here that we allowed into our nation.
Yeah, I agree. Those Germans.
Yeah.
Gotta watch out for the Germans. Okay, so yeah, but just as far as religion is concerned, like it seems like they're pretty open-minded or tolerant. So what is this based off of? Like part of it is maybe the reliance on the classical Greek tradition, or where do you think this is coming from?
I think a lot of it, and then the next slide I'll show it. A lot of it was that they were very well-read individuals. Thomas Jefferson had a copy of the Quran. Many of them had books of other religions, and you see in these photos on the right side, you see this is the two of the halls of power of the United States. This is the Supreme Court and the Library of Congress, the largest library in the world. I didn't want to include the full image on the right side because in the Supreme Court, on this frieze at the top mantle, they have an image of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that they made. I guess they didn't know that it was forbidden in our religion, but he's recognized as one of the greatest lawgivers in history. And they have an image also of Suleiman al-Majid, who I guess was an Ottoman sultan, along with like Musa or Moses alayhi salam, and many others from around the world. And then on the left side in the Library of Congress, you have various figures representing the civilizations of the world, the great civilizations of the world that have contributed to the literary and philosophical tradition. And then you can't see it on the bottom left side, but there's Islam, the Islamic civilization, not the Arab civilization, not the, just the like one or another different race, but Islam itself is recognized as a positive nation building force, which should be appreciated, along with, Egyptians and I think Persians and Rome and Greece as well. And just for a quick overview of those points, it's because Islam, where it took over, are all of the original civilizations of the world. You have within this region the original like pre-pottery Neolithic civilizations of Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, Egypt and North Africa, and the Indus Valley civilization, which of course changed through times to Phoenicia and Persia and the Hittite Empire. All of these various empires came under the fold of Islam. They brought with them all of their cultures and traditions and their philosophies and their lifestyles and their techniques. And together they became more than the sum of their parts. And Islam as a force then is bridging the East and the West. It's really unique in all of the world. Bridges the East and the West. It bridges the black and the white and creates one equalizing force. And inshallah, this map, I think, in the future will have a little bit more green on it, as more people are united under the banner of Islam. And this is just a simple overview of all of the things, all of the areas that were under the Muslim inheritance, which includes many great nations of history and many of the foundational civilizations, places where when people first started grouping together into cities, they had to figure out their like rites of purification, morals and manners, and how to properly, delegate between different sections of society. There's a lot of things that went into the creation of civilization. So whenever we talk in the West about Western civilization, we're talking about a derivation from these original civilizations that were all taken over by Islam, and they all came into Islam, I should say. And I think even Roy Casagrandes, the professor, Dr. Roy Casagrandes at the Austin School, he had a lecture. He's talking about this. People will say Egypt, and they say, oh, Eastern or the Islamic civilization, but we have an obelisk in DC, and we have a pyramid on our
dollar bill.
Yeah. So this is a recognized contributing civilization to Western civilization through Greece and then through Rome. And our alphabet is the Phoenician alphabet, is derived from the Phoenician alphabet, which was basically originally Lebanese kingdom. So much of our civilization comes from this as well. We're not detached from this, even though they put us into a little box of only Western civilization. It's like the Ben Shapiro quote, whenever you have a modifier attached to something.
What's that quote?
Then if you have a modifier attached to something, it turns it into a perversion of itself. So I apply that to this.
He doesn't apply that to Judeo-Christian.
Yeah, that was the meme.
Yeah.
So as the Muslims went through all of these lands, not only did they inherit all of the great things from them, all of the great traditions, but they developed as well. Islam was the marketplace of ideas before John Stuart Mill ever came up with the idea of a marketplace of ideas. Islam, you can find they're interacting and they're having debates, not just putting them to the sword and forcing them, but you can find debates between them and all of these religions and all of these philosophies that they took over. And the image there, it might look a little bit ominous, but this is at the Natural Science Museum here in Houston, and they have a huge section on Islamic alchemy and how the development of Islamic alchemy aided in our modern understanding of alchemy. And we have Arabic numerals, algebra, algorithm, alchemy, the father of optics, the father of sociology and anthropology. That's like Ibn al-Haytham, Ibn Khaldun, and Ibn Battuta. And then as well, like one of the longest running canons of medicine in the history that were used in Western universities was, I believe, Ibn Sina's canon of medicine. So we have a great intellectual tradition that was contributing to the world and contributed to Europe and helped in the Renaissance within Europe as well. Now compare all of this that came through the Islamic, what they call the Golden Age, compare this to the Christian age, the Christian ages, which is referred to as the Dark Age by many. Some historians, they like to get away from the term Dark Ages. They think it's not like an appropriate term, but Imam Malik rahimahullah, he says that knowledge is a light in the heart, and if you have an age where knowledge is restricted from the people, then yes, that's a dark age. And dhulm in Arabic is like the word itself is a type of darkness or relates to a type of darkness. So you have an age of oppression and ignorance, then yes, these are like layers and layers of darkness. And it all began. This is a whole other topic for a different day or different time. But it all began when Rome accepted Christianity and enforced Trinitarian Christianity, first by doing a cultural genocide against the Nazarene and Ebionites, and then forcing the Arians, who were the majority of the church, into their Trinitarian religion. They would actually go church by church and take over the church with imperial force to force their origin or their Trinitarianism of origin. And there's the destruction of Library of Alexandria and the closing of Plato's Academy and all of these different things. And eventually the martyrs of science, as they're called, I guess Galileo, Copernicus, these kind of people, and some that I mentioned in the upcoming slides. But this was a period of fundamentalist feudalism. This was a period where they were almost broken up into city-states, and they had lords over them. Just as the Quran mentions, they had lords over them. And I put in the title the dragon of the Dark Ages, just because it kind of sounds ominous. But then also because in actually your namesake, the book of Daniel in the Bible, it mentions the dragon of Rome. There's a little horn or a little ruler that will utter blasphemies and will persecute the saints. And so God will take the entire dragon and throw the dragon into the fire and destroy it. And so I think that's interesting. And the end of the Dark Ages, actually, you can Google this sometimes. What is the end of the Dark Ages? And it'll come up as the conquest of Constantinople, when the Muslims took over Constantinople. And then the introduction of sciences. Also, the reintroduction of Cicero, finding him in a library. And the last point is the victory of Constantinople. Afterwards, Mehmed al-Fatih and the Ottomans, they killed the, I guess, Transylvanian leader, whose name was Dracula, the dragon. So the end of it, and the timeline that's put in the Bible is 1280 days or something, but it matches up perfectly to the end, the conquest of Constantinople and the killing of the dragon, who was Vlad the Impaler, is the greatest villain of history. That was who the Muslims defeated. So subhanAllah.
Defeating the Dark Age, the dragon of the
exactly,
Dark Age.
Yeah, that was the Muslims' goal in the
Muslim contribution, according to the Bible.
So within that history, there's some hidden things that people may not know. So Constantine's son, Constantius, I believe it was Constantius II, he was actually an Arian monotheist, and they had their own councils and creeds and all these things that they produced. And Constantius II had a Bishop Ulfilas, who was sent to the Goths, or the Germanic peoples. The first Bible that came to the Germanic peoples was from an Arian priest, an Arian bishop. And many of these Germanic tribes and kingdoms came to Arian Christianity first and took over the Roman Empire with Arian Christianity in their hearts. The fall of Rome was done by monotheist Christians. So it's not just a metaphysical, God destroyed them for the people who were attacking Rome. They were thinking these people are forcing, the Trinitarians, or forcing the monotheist Christians into Trinitarianism, and that was a driving force for them. SubhanAllah. And this is also a good point for those who say that maybe we are race traders or something like that. I know Sonny Faz got that comment from Nick recently. But the original Germanic order, the original Germanic beliefs were Arian Christian. So monotheism is actually closer to, Islamic monotheism is much closer. And you see just these two examples here of how Europe fared after Christianity. It was broken into pieces. It was turned into third world nations. Islam took, many of these nations that were broken and separate and united them under one banner. Christianity, as a political force, took this one great nation, the greatest nation that had ever existed, the Roman Empire, and destroyed it and separated it into many pieces. So subhanAllah. And another point I forgot to mention with the last slide is that one of the kingdoms that was the Muslim, that was an Arian Christian kingdom, was called they were called the Vandals. And that's actually the root of the term Andalusia.
Oh.
So many of the people who came into Islam, and I've heard also with like some of the Balkan states, the reason why certain countries in the Balkans became Muslim while others didn't was because they held on, even if secretly, they held on to this Aryan Christianity. And when Islam came, they said, this is the haqq, this is the truth from Allah. And they were able to recognize it. And also the last point about this is on the right, you see that it says Der Deutschebund. This was like like a small state period of Germany. A lot of the Germans who came to Texas, they were called 48ers because they came from the end of this time period whenever they were trying to unify. And a lot of the Italians came from the small, this broken, small, like tribalistic order of Italy. So at the time, as I mentioned with Benjamin Franklin, these were the shithole countries. Now they want to say that the Muslims are coming from shithole countries. You were afforded, if you're Italian or German or many of these other European nations, you were afforded the right to come into this country from a divided, tribalistic, third world, dark age nation. So why would you not allow that right for others as well?
Which century is this? The maps representing which century?
So on the right, this ended in 1848. The people in Texas, actually we talked the other day about Fredericksburg. The people in Texas, they were called 48ers at the time. So it was 1848 whenever they tried to reunify. This was from the Holy Roman Empire was like this as well. It was like a kind of divided, feudalistic rule. But yeah, it was in the up until the 1800s. And the Holy Roman Empire was also the one that forced Trinitarianism and burnt people at the stake for believing in heresies. Not a lot of it is recorded what they believed, but I'm sure it was Arianism. So there's a large period where Arians are being burned at the stake in order to force Germany into Trinitarian Christianity.
Yeah, and just reflect on the fact that the Muslim world is so divided and split up into all these small countries, and nationalism, ethnocentrism is creating a dark age for us.
Oh yeah, unfortunately, a lot of that was, I think, on purpose by the colonists.
Yeah.
So although the Holy Roman Empire and these, the earlier Catholic and Byzantine churches, they didn't have as much record. They wanted to scrub what their heretics were saying. But once the printing press was invented, you had people reading the Bible more, coming to their own conclusions about the Bible, and then developing their own theories and spreading their interpretations around. So you have a period, and I titled it the Monotheist Martyrs. Generally monotheist, not that they were all upon firm Tawheed of Islam, but they are rejecting, they're anti-Trinitarian. And these also overlap with the martyrs of science as well. So firstly, Michael Servetus, he's kind of one of the figureheads of this era. And he was the person who discovered pulmonary circulation. And he was in royal courts, he was a scientist, a doctor, not a dumb person. And he came to find out that God is only one, and that the beliefs about the Trinity are both contradictory and they are against the teachings of the Bible. And he called the Trinity the three-headed dog of hell, Cerberus, which we'll come back to later. And then for the rest, many of these were, there were many who were martyrs at this time, but many of these were founders of different orders of Unitarianism across Europe. Giordano Bruno, a lot of people know him for being a martyr of science, but he was actually killed for partially for rejecting the Trinity, but also he believed in infinity of the universe, so there may have been some other things there. He was a heliocentrist, so that was another point against him. Jacob, I might mispronounce it, but Jacob Paleologus, he actually he viewed Islam as a valid form of Abrahamic religion. So a lot of these people, they were able to read the Quran, and they viewed the Quran as a type of valid religion. It's amazing. In his books, what's left of his writings, he talks about the true believers are the Jews who still practice the Torah, I guess Hasidic Jews or Orthodox Jews, the Arian or monotheist Christians, and then he says the Muslims who believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Well, I have good news for him. Mm-hmm. All of us believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So under this, under their paradigm, the Muslims were actually acceptable as more acceptable than Trinitarian Christianity as a force. But these people, of course, they're viewed as heretics by these religious fundamentalists.
So what do you mean the Crusades? Crusades? Spanish Inquisition, like they're the
on the
ones
right,
who are doing the martyring, like
many of them, like the Spanish Inquisition and the Roman Inquisition, they would send inquisitors like spies to try to figure out if people were following heretical ideas, and then whenever they found that, they would bring them to the courts. So these were actually instances where many of these people were killed by the inquisitors, by those things. But also, I was just showing that these are the kind of wars that the Christians had put against the Muslims and against the earlier Arian Christians or the heretical groups of Christians.
So the martyrs are on the left side, left column, and then
I guess I should have added that to the title, but
yeah, monotheist martyrs versus those who are oppressing them.
And at this time also, this is just an interesting tidbit. I titled this The Secret Turks, even though many of them, they may not have been secretly Muslim. That's not the claim I'm making. But the detractors from these individuals, for example, on the top, John Edwards, in his book Socinianism Unmasked, he's speaking of John Locke, and he's saying that he's going to show everyone that John Locke is actually a secret Muslim. His belief is none other than the belief of a Turk, because he wants a multicultural society in which, and he is against Trinitarianism, and he wants, like scientific progress in these things. So these they viewed as being like, so the detractors viewed them as being like the Turks. And then on the bottom, Stephen Nye, who is an English Unitarian, an early English Unitarian, he's speaking from a positive perspective that the Turkish and Mohammedan lands, the Christians have liberty of conscience. They have freedom of religion for other people. So why can't we have that in our European lands? So this is both the detractors and the proponents of this new, Enlightenment theories who are speaking positively, or speaking of Islam as parallel to these new ideas. And on the right, this is actually incredible. You have Henry Stubb, I think also an English Unitarian, and he writes a long defense, like a large book, Defense of Islam. So I've been Muslim for 10 years. I haven't even written a book this big defending Islam and speaking about how he is upon the faith of like Moses and Jesus and the sum of the Mohammedan religion. On the one hand, not clogging men's faith with the necessity of believing a number of abstruse notions which they cannot comprehend, and which are often contrary to the dictates of reason and common sense, nor on the other hand loading them with the performance of many troublesome, expensive, and superstitious ceremonies, yet enjoining a due observance of religious worship as the surest method to keep men in the bounds of their duty to both man and God. So, subhanAllah, like, he's almost there. And there's many others. There's a video from Brother Paul Williams' channel. He was interviewing a sister, Dr. Francesca Bocca Aldocri. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But she was saying, she went through the archives of Johann Goethe, the great German playwright and intellectual. And she said that he was marking Ramadan in his calendar, reading the Quran. I found this actually, I had to fact check. Not that I distrusted her, but it was so shocking. He has poetry in places where he's speaking of the Quran is the eternal guidance for mankind, and like the beauty that was flowing from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ and enlightening mankind. So this is very early on. There's actually a recent interview on Blogging Theology as well, where he's interviewing somebody, Tariq Hussein, who wrote a book on European Islam in Europe. And he was saying they had coins minted that said La ilaha illallah in Europe. They had, of course, European kings would marry their daughters to, the Muslim kings in Spain or in Sicily or other places. And many of them were reading Quran or talking about converting to Islam. So it's not that there's always been this animosity from the European side towards the Muslims. The intellectual elite, the intelligentsia of Europe, actually had honorable perspectives of Islam.
I think it's very interesting because there has been this kind of perception that Islam is foreign to the history, the heritage of the West, maybe as represented by immigrants coming after the 1960s. But this is very a rich historical review of some of these perspectives on, I just can't believe John Locke was being smeared as a Muslim or for believing.
I think there's something else I found funny. You in your video about Nick Fuentes, You were saying, why is he going after Muslims praying in Times Square whenever there's these other things that are happening? There's a whole section in the Letter of Toleration where John Locke is saying, why are you going after us for believing in why are you going after people for believing in different, different theology when there's whoredom and there's drunkenness and gambling and all of these other things that you should focus your time on. So maybe you're secretly the liberal.
Yeah.
He's secretly the Turk. And you're
John Locke is secretly the Turk. I'm the Enlightenment liberal.
So a lot of these people, though, they were still dealing with a time that was very harsh and repressive towards any dissent, especially Unitarianism, and most definitely if somebody were to have a positive view of Islam or accepting of Islam. And this is a really funny one I found. Montesquieu, writing from France, he was another one of the great forerunners of the forefathers, you could say, in America. He's the one who reintroduced the idea of separation of powers, and he had a lot of other things that he brought to political theory and philosophy in the West. But he wrote this work, which was really a critique of Western civilization. But he couldn't do it himself, of course, because there was persecution by the Catholic Church. So he put it in the mouth of a Persian. And it's a pretty funny thing to read, because there's stereotypes that goes both ways. Like, he's writing to he's like, my 4 wives in my harem and all of my slave women, how you love me and how you please me. It's like, okay, maybe a little
too much fantasizing.
Maybe, yeah, like an Orientalist. But he has other great things. Like, I mean, he's in Paris, so he's writing to one of his wives, and he's like, oh, how pure your love is and how sweet and like how good you are. None of these women in France have any femininity left. They have no modesty. They're like animals,
So Montesquieu is talking about hoflation.
Yeah, Montesquieu at the time, and I don't know that there were Jews doing it there, but this is maybe
just 18th century, right? Or
maybe this is just
17th century.
Maybe this is just French culture. But here in this
talking about hoflation.
In this quote, you have him critiquing the Christian church. Now, he never came out as thoroughly anti-Trinitarian or as Unitarian or Socinian or any of these others. But he's speaking his own ideas here. These long monologues that are produced from his mind and just put into the mouth of somebody else so that he can have a type of distance from it so he won't get in trouble. But he's saying there's a magician called the Pope who makes people believe that 3 is only 1 and that bread is not bread and that wine is not wine and other crazy things. And he says that of the Christians, they are quarreling about religion, but it seems to me they're competing at the same time as to who shall be the least observant of of its rules. Not only are they not better Christians, they're not even better citizens than others. So this is a critique coming from his mind. Maybe he met a Persian or two in his life. Maybe he met some Muslims from other places. But these are the things that he feels necessary to put onto a printing press and spread among people. So there's like an implicit agreement there with this. And I mean, we may never know his true beliefs on it. He, like many of the others, kind of avoids the questions of Trinity and doesn't answer it and just focuses on other things, like promoting religious freedom so that then they can talk about, true monotheism.
Yeah, correct theology.
Yeah, and from the perspective of the Quran, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, speaking of the Christians, He says, "Nearest among them in love to the believers will you find those who say, 'We are Christians,' because among these are men devoted to learning and men who have renounced the world, and they are not arrogant. And when they listen to the revelation received by the messenger, thou wilt see their eyes overflowing with tears, for they recognize the truth. They pray, 'Our Lord, we believe, write us among the witnesses.'" So, subhanAllah, Allah is extolling the virtues of the Christians and the signs of the virtuous Christians. And he's saying there are people who are austere and they're educated and they're humble and they fear God and that they have like an emotional connection to God. So not to say that, all of these figures are, this, but they have many of these good characteristics of certain Christians that Allah praises. And even in today's day and age, you can be on the lookout for the Christians who have these certain ideas. This was, in some ways, I mean, I don't want to say I have these good characteristics, that I had these good characteristics, but in many ways I may have had similar mindsets to some of these enlightenment just by my background and just from, reading them and growing up in a society that was formed by them. And this helped bring me into Islam because of these certain qualities.
Sure.
So now, past the era of all of the martyrs, we have the time in which their ideas can finally spread. Some of them may have been before. Like I think Socinianism came during a time of like political turmoil, so they weren't really as interested in seeking out all of the monotheists. But this Socini was kind of another one of these great figureheads of European Unitarianism. It was called Socinianism, which was John Edwards was saying that John Locke was a Socinian. That was his claim against him. Socinianism unmasked, because they were hiding their beliefs at this time. And Socinianism was well known among the elites of this time, and even into early America. Many people in early America would quote from Socinianism. And the Polish Brethren, they have what's here on the left. It's called the Rakow Catechism or the Rakovian Catechism, basically like their antidote to the Nicene Creed, in which they say the principal thing is to guard against falling into the common error, where it is maintained with palpable contradiction that there is in one God only one essence, but that he has three persons. And interestingly, they put forward an argument here. One of their like logical contradictions of Trinitarianism is that for each hypostasis, for each person, they would have to have an individual essence. Because as they say, you have one whatness and three who-ness. But then if you ask them, what is Jesus? What is the Holy Spirit? What is the Father? They will, if you ask them what, they will define three different whats. So it sounds kind of crazy. I mean, it is. But they're saying that you cannot possibly have one essence shared between three different persons, because the essence would have to encompass in some ways their personhood. Because if it's the whatness of everything that they are, then the personhood would be part of it. Many of the others, they started different religions. George Fox was the founder of the Quakers, who, and I'm not sure if this is maybe similar to what like the emotional state of the believer or the Christians, but they would shake whenever they would read the Bible because they were out of such fear of God. And interestingly, John Milton and John Locke, these were the kind of progenitors of the American political theory. These were the ones whose ideas became, from republicanism and liberalism, became what's known as the Radical Whig Party of Britain. And the Radical Whig Party was the kind of political theory father, or the political theory like predecessor of the Founding Fathers. And both of them, John Milton, he wrote a 1,000-page treatise on Christianity, in which he is refuting the Trinity and refuting the hypostatic union and all of these things. But he had to keep it hidden until after he died, because he would have been persecuted for it. And John Locke, like I said, he never openly said he was non-Trinitarian, but he's speaking in his letter concerning toleration. He's speaking about the church is forcing people to believe doctrines that are not in the Bible, and these creeds that were inventions and innovations of men. And he's comparing it to, imagine if you had a Jewish king who forced the people to worship Baal. That's his comparison there, is the worship of Baal. So he's saying they're forcing us to worship an idol.
Yeah, the Trinity.
And he whenever he's speaking of it, he says the true church is under persecution. The true church of Jesus, they say, will always be in persecution. Well, this is 150 years after the Protestant Reformation. The Protestants were not being killed in England anymore. There was like 150 years since Bloody Mary had killed a lot of Protestants, and they decided to stop, killing people. But here you have him saying that the true church is being persecuted and killed because they're being forced to worship somebody like Baal and all of this. They're being forced to all of these innovations. I wonder who he's talking about. Who are these true Christians, trying to stay away from idolatry? And whenever they asked, they tried to put him on trial for, believing in monotheism. And whenever he asked, he was just like, I just focus on the Bible and trying to have a tolerant society. He didn't go into the details. So most historians will take that as the avoidance as like admission. Many others, Isaac Newton, one of the greatest people in history, as far as like his contribution to the world.
Yeah.
The book that says that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the #1 influence, that was written, I don't remember the name of the author, but I think Isaac Newton is like number 3 or 4 in that list, because everything that we have, these computers and the roads and all of this, much of it is based off of his understanding of the laws of nature. I mean, you would know better than I do as a Harvard physicist. Mm-hmm. But he spoke about one God. He wrote more about theology than he did about physics or science or math combined. So his primary interest was theology. And as a secondary hobby, he invented calculus and discovered the laws of physics. But he is actually having communication with John Locke, and they're writing back and forth saying these verses in the Bible were added in order to promote the Trinity, and this is why we can like reject it. So they're writing back and forth talking about this, and they're in the political tradition of John Milton, or close to the political tradition of John Milton within this like radical Whig or this Republican Party. So it's pretty easy to see that there was like this group that was formed at the time that just couldn't be open with their beliefs. Others, Voltaire, Rousseau, Kant, I included just because they were anti-Trinitarian in general. And many of them might have had some other strange ideas about Islam or strange ideas about God even, because they're trying to piece together how it works, one God and, and like the universe. So people like Spinoza are coming up with like a panentheist or a, substance monist perspective of God.
Spinoza was Jewish.
He was excommunicated from the Jewish church though, or the Jewish synagogue though, which is why I included him. And he was also pretty influential. Mm-hmm. So I included him just in this general, like,
Enlightenment,
European, Unitarian.
Yeah.
And then Joseph Priestley, the last one there, he was friends with the founding fathers. And he was part of this Lunar Society of Birmingham, which was a monotheist, essentially a monotheist, like intellectual society. And he was invited by the founding fathers to come here. So this shows a direct connection, not only between the political philosophy, John Locke being quoted in the Constitution or the Declaration, and many of these others, John Milton, the father of republicanism, being like very influential. This shows not only the political inheritance from London, but then some of this industrial and scientific inheritance from this, they call it the Midlands Enlightenment, with Joseph Priestley and many others. Now overall, these various threads come together into kind of an overarching topic or overarching category of theistic rationalism. It's not my words. This is one of the names that historians or philosophers give to this period of history, that these people believed in God and they were rational about it. They were trying to understand God rationally. And I remember as a kid reading about these people, like wanting to learn about the founding fathers and reading about theistic rationalism and thinking, well, this actually makes a lot more sense than what they're telling me, that you should be rational about God. And eventually, years later, I come to the Quran and it's like, use your reason, use your rationality. Are there other gods with Allah? Use your mind, use your reason. And that's, I think, like subhanAllah. I mean, it's incredible that these people had some similar ideas and they were able to develop a society based on these ideas, even outside of direct prophetic tradition.
But these people, I mean, they would be considered heretical, like by Christians, like mainline Protestants or
they
Catholics.
Did, yeah.
Like they would not really fit into like this kind of rationalism. Like they would kind of be viewed in the same way that like Muslims today would see like Amina Wadud or I don't know, Khalid Abul Fadl or some of these like reformists who they want to say, yeah, we don't really go by the Quran, we don't really go by the Sunnah, like we believe in God, we believe in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu in a kind of a general sense, but we're not like fanatics about it. Like that's
I've also thought even about like
Susan B. Anthony, for example, like she's hostile
suffragette.
to the Bible. She's hostile to the Bible. She's hostile like to the church, and even like she has some statements that are hostile to God. Like it seems like she could be an atheist, but maybe she was just trying to be heretical, but not necessarily a pure like atheist in a sense.
She? I included her. I think she was a member of a Unitarian church. So that's why but Unitarianism, the bad thing about like this theistic rationalism or the deism or the Quakers is that their main dogma is that they don't have a dogma. So they're dogmatic about being non-dogmatic. And that causes them to just like they're diffuse and nobody knows that this was part of the early American society, and they don't uphold their churches like really in the same way. They're just, we welcome everyone. You could be a Unitarian now and be an atheist. You could be a Unitarian priest and then go home and worship idols. So yeah, I could imagine that some of them. I tried to filter out any of the ones who were like openly atheist, but if there's something there, then yeah, I'd have to look more into that. But this just shows that most of the founding fathers, most of the early
but no one like would question the Americanness. That's I think the point here.
Oh, yeah.
Like no one questions the Americanness of these figures and how critical they've been to the history of America, like the Transcendental movement with Emerson, Thoreau, Walt Whitman, like no one, or Mark Twain, for
Yeah,
example.
we have to read all of these in school. This is our curriculum at this point.
Yeah, it's our curriculum in America. But like, if you want to claim that there's some kind of Christian essence to being American, then where does that exist in the works of like Susan B. Anthony or even Walt Whitman or Henry David Thoreau? Like, it's not the kind of conventional religious conservative Christianity of someone like Matt Walsh
Oh yeah,
today, or like
not at all.
these
Anything
figures of
definitely with Catholicism, they did not like that. Protestants, they were a little more tolerant, and then but they were either deists or Unitarian or Arian, like trying to be an Arian revival, like Neo-Arianism or something. So there's a broad range there that's under this umbrella of theistic rationalism. But these are all of the main contributing figures, all of the giants of the American Revolution and later periods. And on top of that, this isn't like aside from that, this isn't an endorsement of them or their beliefs. Of course, there's certain critiques that we have of them, of their political theory, of their philosophy. But it's something for us to work with as Muslims in America, that these people are in many ways closer to Islam than to traditional Christian like political theory. In many ways, they might have certain problems like in their society of having lords and having feudalistic systems, having oppressive like Trinitarianism forced upon them, and they're trying to remove that from their society. So it's not to say that they're like given like blessings by Allah and guided by Allah, but they can recognize the problems in their society and try to work to remove that. And that's a point that I wanted to make about John Locke. And I mean I agree with you and Brother Muhammad Hijab in like the criticisms of liberal political theory. I think that a point that's missing there is that whenever he's saying we want liberty, what he means is please stop killing us for believing in one God. Please stop forcing us to to be subjugated to these oppressive tyrant kings. And with a lot of them, that was a starting point for them.
Yeah, I think it could be a starting point, but I think they went pretty far beyond that.
Oh,
They
definitely.
went further beyond that, and they had like their understanding of progressivism, like progressing in terms of science, progressing in terms of morality, because they viewed like, because the question was, well, why are you, John Locke, or you monotheists, or secret Turks, like you just want to impose your version, your understanding of Christianity. And then if you deny that and you say, no, we're not imposing anything, and that opens the door to, well, in the future that there might be other systems, there might be other morality. Are you fine with that? And they said yes. Like they very positively viewed progress.
Oh yeah, and we see that now with America being hijacked by these Christian nationalists. That the system doesn't have the boundaries in place. I think that's one thing that I took away, was that these are in many ways maybe they're idealists, but they don't have proper boundaries in place. Some of their ideals might be good or positive. Better understanding of the fitrah versus an understanding of like original sin and everyone is evil and needs to be suppressed, and better understanding, more logical, rational understandings of one God and how that one God interacts with the world through like establishing principle and order in the world. But definitely a lot of critiques there, and in the future I'd love to read through them and develop better critiques and hopefully form a more perfect union by bringing our Islamic political theory into the American dialogue. And apart from the churches, like the Quakers or the Unitarian Universalists, or all these churches that have kind of like fizzled out, this belief system that they had became the background belief of America. This is, for most people, this is partly a fitri thing, like children are naturally monotheist, but partly also it's within the culture. I mean, I've even asked people in my family who I love, who brought me to church as a kid, and when I converted to Islam, like, do you really believe that Jesus is God? Or do you believe that he's like sent by God with a message from God and with like, power or like, light from God? They're like, well, no, he's sent by God and he has like the Spirit of God for sure. Yeah. And they don't actually believe, many of them don't actually believe the Trinity. And I've had that conversation a million times with a million people. I mean, maybe not a million, but hyperbolically speaking. I've had that conversation with many people and they don't actually believe. Even like 8 people who are like atheists or something. Yeah, there's a higher power. For sure. Yeah, there's like something going on there. There's a lot that's like a background belief, even among people who aren't religious at all. And Thomas Jefferson said as much. He says that in this country, without kings or priests to force people, the genuine doctrine of God is reviving, and I trust that there is not a young man now living in the U.S. who will not die a Unitarian. And then for the bottom one, if you could remove the... He says, the pure and simple unity of the creator of the universe is now all but ascendant in the eastern states. It is dawning in the west and advancing towards the south, and I confidently expect that the present generation will see Unitarianism become the general religion of the United States. So this was actually the intention of the Founding Fathers in creating this country. It's not to promote Catholicism or Protestantism. Their intention to spread, the belief that they were intending to spread was Unitarianism. And they wanted to have liberty of conscience because they thought, it's so obvious that God is one. If you remove these tyrants, everybody's just going to believe it.
Yeah, the only way that you can get people to accept this mystery of the Trinity is through imposition, through like just literally oppressing people and preventing them from questioning it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's historically true and true also in the lives of people nowadays. And just going over also for a separate thing, separate like tangent on the topic. A lot of the greatest inventors of America, the reason why they were able to go out and make these great discoveries like Newton or Edison and Tesla or Alexander Graham Bell with telecommunications is because they had this framework, maybe in some ways inherited from Cicero, that there's one God, and then that one God has like attributes and upholds the natural law of the world. And that within these natural laws and this natural order, there are these energies in the world that we can harness and that we can use for the benefit of mankind. So many of the greatest figures within American tradition for like these great inventions and these great discoveries. Well, I actually forgot to include Benjamin Franklin too, with electricity, with the kite. But they were intending to harness the powers that God has put in the world by way of his attributes and the laws that he implemented in the world. And this is clear in many of their texts. And Franklin Lloyd Wright, also a great architect of America. I think Tim Berners-Lee, he invented World Wide Web. There was another one who was a Unitarian, Linus Pauling. I think he invented the internet, but he's like an atheist Unitarian. Like I said, they have these they just go to Unitarian church because I guess it's like a social thing, but they're not actually Unitarian. It's like a strange religion. But another point that I'll point out on the right. Erasmus Darwin and Josiah Wedgwood. This was part of that Lunar Society of Birmingham with Joseph Priestley, who is the discoverer of oxygen. So a Darwin married a Wedgwood, and their child was Charles Darwin. So even Charles Darwin came out of this, but he became agnostic later in his life. He said, well, God is just like too complex. It's so far out. I'm just focused on the world. And so he invents this idea of like randomness that he puts in, which of course you and many other Muslim have their critique of. And Einstein, last point, was he followed the God of Spinoza, is what he said. So he had a kind of a... Actually, do you even know what Spinoza believed? I tried reading through his ethics. Nobody knows what he believes. It's so complex.
It's like pantheist, like monism.
Yeah, it's like people say it's maybe it's pantheism, panentheism, maybe it's acosmic, maybe it's monism, maybe it's like wahdatul wujud, maybe he got it from Ibn Arabi. But
it's like very difficult to try to figure out what he's saying.
Yeah, I was trying to read through it for this, and I couldn't make it. I just have to put that on the back burner for later.
Good old Baruch.
Yeah. And here's one for you. If you wanted to remove the screen, do you recognize this building here?
Let me see this.
That is the Harvard Divinity School.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so the Harvard Divinity School was founded by a Unitarian, Henry Ware, and for 125 years was maintained by Unitarianism. And part of the reason why Yale was founded was to get away from the Unitarian and the liberal, Harvard University. Yeah. And many of these others are also, like Cornell was founded by Unitarians who were actually the priests of their Unitarian church. Stanford University by Unitarians, many by the Hicksite Quakers.
How did I not recognize Divinity School?
I don't know. It looks like every other college in America. So that's kind of...
No, but did I ever have a class at the Div School? I think I tried to shop a course that was being taught on Islamic law by one of these experts from the law school. But I think the course was in the law school, not in the Div School, even though it was technically under
That's
their
interesting.
div school
And did you
curriculum.
go to Tufts University as well?
Yeah.
I thought I remember hearing something about that. It was founded by Charles Tufts. Was a Unitarian.
Yeah,
Unitarian or
my
Universalist.
degree right there at the top, the
Oh,
brown one.
there you go. Wow, you are just... maybe that's why you are the way that you are.
Yeah.
You're just a product of these heretic Unitarians.
Exactly.
So this is, you know, like to show that these are not just individuals. This is not just movements and groups, but these were actually like foundational institutions for America.
Yeah.
And beyond just the institutions or individuals or groups, you have them making their own colonies and their own cities. And I put the word utopia, not to say that these are perfect societies, but that a lot of the people who came to America, they had this idea of creating utopian societies. Utopianism was a movement. So, I mean, there are beautiful places to go. I would love to, I wouldn't mind living there. But many of these are across the East Coast. Boston became, like many of the Puritans, like I think half of the Puritan churches, or more than half in some cities like Boston, became Unitarian. So it actually was, as Jefferson said, that Unitarianism would spread. And supposedly some of my ancestors are from the Puritans. I don't know, we haven't gotten it checked, but I don't know if any of them were Unitarian at any point, but they're pretty fundamentalist now. I was actually going to show the image. That's Burlington, Vermont. Beautiful town in the like right on Lake Champlain, right in the mountains. And the main street there, here in the South, you would have a main street or a town square leading up to a Methodist church or, you know, Baptist church. But there they have their main streets built, and the whole city is designed around the Unitarian church. And you have this in many places, even Lexington and Concord, like the great battle sites of the Revolution. A lot of the people who are maintaining the Revolutionary War sites are Unitarians. And this, just as a side point, people now are crying about Epic City, that they're going to build a Muslim town.
Yeah, in Dallas.
In Dallas, even though it's like the most liberal kind of group of Muslims you could be a part of, like the most, like they acquiesce the most to the West.
Yeah.
But people cry about it. That's what America was founded for. Like the Catholics were that originally. They were the ones who were like the weird ones. Like, we don't want you to form colonies here. And same with some of the other groups. But this is what America was founded for, so that people could come and develop these utopian societies, develop their image of what a society should be, and have their people, you know, work together towards that. And then their ideas that they develop there can spread through the rest of the country. The good things that they develop there. So there's a legal precedent for creating Muslim colonies in the country. And there's actually many other people. I know many Muslim entrepreneurs and things who have large plots of land. They want to do this as well. They're getting the you know, fundings together and getting the individuals together to do this. This is like going to happen within our lifetimes. Now, with all of this out of the way, I think with the local anesthetic applied, I can go in and surgically remove this tumor of Christian nationalism.
Okay.
Because pretty much everyone who created this country had criticisms of Christianity, or of the church, I could say. Obviously, we know the Constitution and the Declaration, all of the founding documents. They don't quote the Bible. They don't quote, you know, any saints or any church fathers. But they explicitly excluded them from these documents. And many of the founding fathers actually hated the Christian religion and hated the Bible. And they say so much in their quotes. But you see here, this is just a small selection from the earlier list, those who actually had open critiques of Christianity. But Thomas Paine, he's the father of the Revolution. His pamphlets, Common Sense, it's still considered today to be the most widely read work in American history, because it was spread so much in order to fuel the revolution. So these are the ideas that fueled the revolution. And you'll have to see what he says about Christianity, because it is not a very good idea. Ethan Allen as well captured Fort Ticonderoga, like leader of the Green Mountain Boys. That town, Burlington, Vermont, the train to get there is called the Ethan Allen train, or the Ethan Allen Express. And many of the presidents, Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Jefferson and Madison being the ones who wrote the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, drafted the Bill of Rights. So these are not any small figures or peripheral figures. This is the central figure. And the peripheral figures were the other types of Christians, or the other, you know, leaders of their states. But this is the core, like, these are the fathers. The others are just, you know, members of the Constitutional Convention and so on. So with Thomas Paine first, his is the most one of the worst. But he wrote it after all of his other political writings because he knew that it would be so controversial. But he's speaking about the Bible and all of the, cruelty and the barbarism and the genocide and the infanticide in the Bible. And he says it would be more consistent that we call it the word of a demon rather than the word of God. It is a history of wickedness that has served to corrupt and brutalize mankind. Then speaking of Trinitarianism and theology, he says, it is the study of nothing. It is founded upon nothing, rests on no principles, proceeds by no authority. It has no data, can demonstrate nothing, and admits of no conclusion. So it's pretty clear that he doesn't want Christianity to have anything to do with this government that he's helping to fuel by his words.
It's almost like he's a Marcionite.
Marcionite?
Yeah, the ones who thought that the Christians, heretical group that thought that the God of the Old Testament is actually Satan.
Oh, I think he's kind of more like just a philosopher.
Yeah.
I think he has some quotes where he's talking about Jesus in a positive sense, like the words of Jesus, but speaking about maybe the corruption of the Bible, which I'll get to in a few slides. But imagine a political figure saying this today. If like a president said this or something, people would be up in arms. But this was like one of the greatest founders of this country. Then Ethan Allen, the Revolutionary War hero I mentioned. This is, I think, an important point in reference to theistic rationalism and how these different threads came together into this group. Because he says that he's been called a deist, and he's never disputed, but he's just conscious he's not a Christian. And he doesn't really know whether or not he's a deist. So maybe he's kind of like, agnostic as to all of the different things. He knows there's a God or a higher power, but he doesn't know exactly how it works with mankind. And this is a pretty common sentiment among a lot of people during the Enlightenment and during the founding of the country.
He's just spiritual.
Yeah, spiritual, but SBNR, spiritual but not religious. And or maybe philosophically inclined, I think, for a lot of them. Then George Washington. George Washington was an Episcopal, so he's the only one on this list that's actually was a practicing member of a church, although he stopped later in his life. I've spoken to Episcopalians, and they said that, well, maybe, the war traumatized him, and so he stopped going to church or something. But maybe also all of his friends were Unitarians and deists, and they were saying these things about the Bible, and he started to think that maybe that's right. But he said that of the differences among mankind, the differences in sentiment and religion are the most inveterate and distressing and ought most to be deprecated. So he's pointing out that these like tyrant Christian kings and the people trying to enforce the Trinitarianism are some of the worst kind of like corruptors of mankind. So at the very least, he's recognizing the problem with Christian nationalism, which is why I included the quote. Because the Christian nationalism is what would cause these theological debates to become a matter of force.
Yeah.
Then John Adams, speaking about Christianity as, the point that I mentioned earlier, that fables and legends got blended with the Jewish and Christian revelation to make them the most bloody religion that ever existed. So they're not pointing at Islam and saying Islam is the worst religion, Islam is the religion of the sword. They're pointing at the church and saying that Christianity is the most bloody religion that ever existed. And then on the right, you see him, first of all, referencing, and I think this just shows the amount that they had studied this, referencing Christianity as Platonic and Pythagorean, which, of course, I'm sure you know, the Alexandrian school, they had adopted a lot of these Pythagorean ideas of a monad and then a dyad from the monad, like a triad, and then developed that also into like a tetrad and an ogdoad and a dodecad. And they had these different like layers of being that were built upon some sort of mathematic ratios or something. And the early Christian schools of Alexandria, again, this is a totally separate topic, but the early Christian schools of Alexandria, the Gnostics as they're called, some of them were dyadic, some of them were ogdoadic, and then the triadic school, which became the school of Origen, was the one that won out. So it's like a one for one, and it just shows that they had researched this topic and they understood well what they were talking about. These weren't just little doubts that they were having. This was a movement that they were a part of that spans centuries, and they had done their research into millennia of history. And when they did, they mention here that Catholic Christianity specifically has prevailed for 1,500 years and received a mortal wound of which the monster must finally die. So I'll have to go on a little tangent here and mention this little kid, Nick, as his channel. And he's saying that Islam is incompatible with Western civilization. And a true patriot went and stopped those Muslims from praying. Well, here's a real true patriot. Here's a real true patriot for you. John Adams, saying that your religion, Catholic Christianity, is a monster which must finally die. That doesn't really sound like America First Christian Nationalism of Nick Fuentes, right?
Yeah.
Or Thomas Paine saying that the Bible is a work of a demon. He wants to say that the Muslims worship a demon, and yet claim the founding fathers as his inheritance. But yet the founding fathers that he's hearkening back to are saying that his Bible is the work of a demon.
His Bible, his church.
And as you'll see next, Thomas Jefferson goes even farther in saying that this demon is a three-headed dog of hell, Cerberus. So everything he said about Islam, everything that these Christian nationalists say about Islam, are what the founding fathers said about them. So they can't have their cake and eat it too. Hopefully some people, some fine gentlemen in the chat, can go and take these quotes and put them into his, give him a super chat or something, so that way he and all of his ilk can know what the founding fathers really thought of them. That their God is a hocus pocus phantasm of a god like another Cerberus, with one body and three heads, who had its birth and growth in the blood of thousands and thousands of martyrs. And it's interesting, actually. I remember one of the points that really broke me away from Trinitarianism was in a theology class with William Lane Craig saying, it's like a springboard for understanding. That God is like Cerberus. He's one body but three heads, one being but three different personalities. And everyone, maybe it's just a fitra thing, everyone in that class who were all raised Christian hated it.
Yeah.
They all thought it was terrible.
That's his go-to analogy. That's his go-to analogy for explaining the Trinity in debates, and he goes straight to Cerberus.
Oh, yeah. I heard that and I was like, is this the best they got? This is it? Like the three-headed... you can take your three-headed dog of hell. I will take infinite light of the universe as my reality.
Oh, so that's Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, and more on Jefferson.
Pretty hardcore.
Oh, yeah. So more on Jefferson. He's speaking about all of the millions who have been killed by Christianity and burnt, fined, tortured, imprisoned. And he said, what is the effect of coercion? To make one half of the world fools and the other half hypocrites, to support roguery and error all over the earth. So speaking of Christian nationalism, saying that Christian nationalism only brings hypocrisy and foolishness to the earth. And in countries that have these priesthoods, he's saying the priest has always been hostile to liberty, always in alliance with the despot, abetting his abuses in return for protection of his own. And this part is, I think, incredible, especially considering the verse of the Quran that I brought up, is that the way that they're able to pervert society is by mystery and jargon unintelligible to mankind, which is a safer engine for their purposes. So Allah mentions with the Christian nations monotheism, bringing people to away from worshiping others with Allah, and then having lords over them. And I mentioned how the doctrine of original sin helped to suppress and oppress the people, but also you have him here saying that whenever you have these people, they think of themselves, they're kind of like sophists, they think of themselves as being so high and mighty, and we understand this mystery, we accept this mystery. Well, then they create like this class division, they raise themselves above others, make themselves to be arrogant, and then that allows them to be despotic and tyrants over the people who are naturally disposed to monotheism, predisposed to monotheism. So you also see here, he speaks about Jesus as having the purest religion ever preached to mankind. So it's not that these people hated Jesus, but like many of the Enlightenment authors viewed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I don't agree with this. This is a problem that they had. But like them, he viewed it as like a great philosopher, a great moral teacher, one of the wise men of history, rather than being, the God sent down to earth. That was kind of their perspective. So that is a point of divergence between us and the Muslims. I'm not saying that they were Muslims or that they were, upon what Muslims believed, 100%. But they're able to take care of some of these problems of Christian society. It's like if a drunk stopped drinking alcohol.
Yeah, they weren't out there, chanting Christ is King.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That wasn't their perspective. That wasn't their worldview.
Yes, and then James Madison. James Madison is a little bit more tame than the rest. He's speaking of ecclesiastical establishments having a contrary opinion during contrary operation during 15 years of Christianity, or 15th century, sorry, of Christianity. It has been on trial, and what have been its fruits for the legal establishment of Christianity, which is Christian nationalism. Legal establishment of Christianity is Christian nationalism, in so many words. And he said the fruits are pride and indolence in the clergy, ignorance and servility in the laity, and in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution. And speaking of these ecclesiastical establishments, or Christian nationalism, he's saying that they are upholding the thrones of political tyranny, and that in no instance they are the guardians of the liberties of the people, so that rulers who wish to subvert the public liberty may have found an established clergy convenient auxiliaries. A just government instituted to secure and perpetuate it needs them not. So this is explicitly against Christian nationalism. Legal establishment of Christianity was explicitly excluded, and they used 1,500 years of examples through all of time to show that it only does evil. And again, I just have to keep going back to that verse in the Quran where Allah is saying that they make lords over them. They become tyrants by having these clergy as their henchmen for them. So subhanAllah, Allah is the best at judging our sociological situations.
SubhanAllah.
Now, beyond Madison, I think was Madison the last one? Oh, the next point is the problems of the age of ignorance.
Oh, next slide?
Yeah, next slide. And I use the age of ignorance because in the Quran it's Jahiliyyah. Because when they would be, racist towards blacks or racist towards the Jews or others, just based on account of their race, not on account of their culture or their, philosophies or things like that. Whenever they would be racist, he would call it Jahiliyyah. And the time before Islam was Jahiliyyah. So you see in the time before Islam in America, before Islam overtakes America, you see Jahiliyyah among many of these founding fathers who even I have admirable quotes, you could say. But you'd see Thomas Jefferson speaking about the blacks as having a strong and disagreeable odor, in reason they're much inferior to the whites, and their imagination they're dull, tasteless, and anomalous. So he's speaking about racial superiority. That was a problem that they had. White supremacy was an issue that they had at the time. That's definitely true. And then on the left side, the other great issue among some of the founders, especially George Washington here, was the issue of genocidal rhetoric. He says that he's calling for the total destruction and devastation of Native American settlements, capturing as many prisoners of every age and sex as possible, ruining their crops in the ground, preventing them from planting more, and not listening to any cries for peace from them before the total ruin of their settlements is effective. And then at the end, and this is a really incredible quote, he says that our future security will be in their inability to injure us, the distance to which they are driven, and, get this, by the terror with which the severity of the chastisement they receive will inspire. So, Daniel, if a pianist is somebody who plays piano, what is somebody who inflicts terror upon settlements of men, women, and children? What would that be called?
Could be terrorist.
I think that's a terrorist. I think Thomas Jefferson is saying that he's a terrorist and terrorizing innocent women and children.
Was that Jefferson or
George Washington. I apologize. Yeah. George Washington was a terrorist to the Native Americans, as were many of the other colonists during that time. And Jefferson is a racial segregationist, as I mentioned. But Washington, he was, as I mentioned, he was the closest to the church. And he's the only one really that I could find these overtly genocidal statements from. So it seems like even his little bit of proximity to the church caused him to be even more genocidal than the rest.
Yeah, it's interesting tension because on the one hand, they are open to other theologies, at least Jefferson is, talking about Unitarianism or even maybe having a copy of the Quran, and we saw in those quotes that you presented. But when it comes to race, then they're white supremacists.
Oh, yeah, they had some strange ideas there. And I also want to point out something I thought was interesting when I was watching Tucker Carlson's interviews. And he's doing a great job. I mean, I appreciate what he's doing for Gaza and for, America. But he's I think he's Episcopalian. I believe he's an Episcopalian. He's saying, this Gaza isn't our Western heritage. This isn't our Christian Western civilization. Well, this is your forefather. in your church and in your state. And he is talking about totally destroying settlements, not listening to Christ for peace, and driving people out as far as he can. So are you ready to condemn George Washington? Are you ready to condemn the biblical tradition? So
these contradictions, they can't really reconcile.
No, not at all. Now, to be fair, some at the time, had softer views. So Jefferson, he is speaking of the Native Americans, and he actually wants race mixing between the whites and the Native Americans. So all these white nationalists nowadays who want to follow the tradition of the founding fathers, maybe they can go find a nice wife from the Native Americans to mix with, or Mexican,
A lot of them would like that.
Maybe they would. That might be good for them, calm them down.
A lot of them have yellow fever. What can we say?
Is that what it's called?
Yellow fever.
Wouldn't it be red for the? Yeah, isn't that what they call the Native Americans?
For Asians, yeah, they call it yellow fever. These racists.
But he's talking about becoming one nation with the Native Americans. And I've been to certain areas like Taos in New Mexico. It's one of the most beautiful places in America, and you can really feel a harmony between some of the settlers there and between the Americans. And this isn't Taos. This is Colonial Williamsburg, I believe. And this was they call it a Negro schoolhouse, but a schoolhouse for black children. And when Benjamin Franklin visited it, you can keep it up if you like, or when Benjamin Franklin visited it, he's speaking of when he saw these children educated and with a proper education, he recognized the natural capacities. He had a higher opinion of the natural capacities of the black race than I ever before entertained. And at the end, he said, I will not undertake to justify my prejudices, nor to account for them. So even in his scientific worldview, they put it to the test, put these children into proper education, and they find that they come out the same as the rest of the children. So there is even at this time some diverging perspectives. There are some who are against slavery or against segregation, even at this time. So it's not like I'm painting a blanket picture that they were all evil, but saying that there are maybe positive things that they said or accurate prognosis that they gave of Christianity and Christian civilization. And then there are negative things that were mixed in as well. So this is why we as Muslims can't take them as our ultimate authorities in in life, or use their literature to formulate our societies as opposed to the Quran. And all of this evil that came, the racism, the genocide, all of these things you can find from the Bible. Here, and many of your viewers I'm sure are very well familiar with this, the statements, this is supposedly the command of God saying, you shall save alive nothing that breathes, but devote them to complete destruction. And go and strike Amalek, which is quoted recently with the Gaza genocide, Netanyahu. And he says, kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. And this is not just theoretical, but on the right side you see it's actually practical in the Bible that and this is of course a corruption, Muslims cannot accept this, but when Musa alayhi salam in this mythology was approached after a war, they left some of the children alive and some of the women alive. And he said, what are you doing? Go kill the women and go kill the little boys. Speaking of the babies and the little boys, and leave the young girls, and I believe this is referring to prepubescent young girls, leave them alive and keep them for yourselves. And I've had this discussion with Christians. Keep them for yourselves. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Just, in your house.
Yeah.
Keep them for yourself just as a little friend to talk to sometimes. Yeah. I don't know what they think this means. But this is just the point that the George Washington destruction of settlements, the Native American genocides, even the Gaza genocide, even what Epstein is doing, the killing children, raping prepubescent girls, this is all biblical. This is all straight from the Bible. So if you hate these things, if you hate your women to be raped, and you hate your babies to be murdered, and you hate to see babies across the ocean get murdered, then you should hate the source of these ideologies. And as I mentioned with Washington, this came to fruition in America as well. One great example I'd like to give is I don't mean great, I mean terrible example that I'd like to give is the Mystic Massacre, or the Pequot Massacre. I'm sure you've probably passed through Mystic Seaport between Boston and New York. Yeah. In this massacre, the Puritans They went to a Native American colony, or Native American village, while the men were out hunting. They surrounded it, lit it on fire, and it says that they would shoot them or stab them as they came out, as they were trying to flee the fire. The women and the children. This is the Puritans. These are the exact same people, like exact same individuals that we celebrate in America on Thanksgiving. The exact same individuals. And this is the craziest part. And it's like hard to even believe. But he says, horrible was the stink and scent thereof, but the victory seemed a sweet sacrifice, and they gave the prayers thereof to God. So this is a human sacrifice cult. A Christian human sacrifice cult saying that the smell of the rotting babies and women is similar to the smell of whenever they would do burnt offerings on Temple Mount. This is what the Puritans believe. This is the Christian nationalists of that time who were trying to form their Christian utopia, their Christian, settlements. And subhanAllah, again, if you hate Gaza, if you hate Epstein, then you should hate this Christian nationalist tradition that does this again and again through all of history.
Wow. That's following the Bible.
And just as we mentioned with Amalek, with Netanyahu, and with the Bible, the colonists who were killing the Native Americans were using Amalek as their example. If you're saying the Bible is a manual for your life, the Bible is a manual for government, it's a manual for everything, right? It's like your life, you look into it for the answers for everything. Okay, now you're a governor or a general, and you have this clash of civilizations. How are you going to deal with these people that have competing land claims? Well, let's see what the Bible says about that. Oh, it says to murder their babies. It says call them Amalek and kill them all, men, women, and children. And then on the left, this is Timothy Dwight, part of the Yale Great Awakenings. As I mentioned, Yale was created to to go against the traditions of like the Unitarians, or to create like a Christian university. And he actually was opposed to the founding fathers. He wrote a book like the like notes on the last century or something like that. I forget the name exactly, but he's speaking of these like terrible atheists, like heretics, who are trying to create this new culture. Speaking about the founding fathers. So if you're a Christian nationalist now, you would have been there and hated the founding fathers. You would have been on the side of those who opposed the founding fathers and who wrote pamphlets against them. You would not have been on the side of the founding fathers. So these Christian nationalists are just trying to ride the coattails of Enlightenment, monotheist, perennialist, philosophical civilization. They're just trying to ride the coattails and hijack it for their own purposes, just as they did with Rome originally. But this was a poem. I don't need to quote from it directly. I just included it. It says, I think it was on the Internet Archives. It's actually free. You can go read it. But it was considered one of the first great epic poems of American history. And it's called The Conquest of Canaan. And it's comparing the conquest of America to the conquest of Canaan. They would actually, there's this great, I'm forgetting his name, but there's a great Native American scholar, one of the northern states, Minnesota. I think he's a Sioux. And he has a book on it. And he has many lectures on how Christianity influenced the genocide of the Native Americans. And he's speaking about how they would actually send advertisements, just like these Jews are doing with Israel here, advertisements for stolen land. They would bring advertisements back to Europe saying there's a land flowing with milk and honey, and all of this land for you to, arable land that's never been tilled before. You can come and it's all yours because these savage, subhumans are occupying it. So it's the exact same thing that the Jews are doing. And this is I think goes to the whole question of whether it's the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog.
No.
With Israel and America, they're saying this is not the Western tradition that Israel is doing. Well, actually, this is probably a vestige of the Western tradition. They got suppressed through the Confederacy. They got suppressed,
It's biblical. That's the biblical core is the same.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So. And in America, this was a very widespread tradition among
it's not just Netanyahu.
The frontiers.
It's not just Netanyahu citing these verses. It's also some of these American frontiersmen and founding fathers who are citing those same verses as Netanyahu.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So.
And the same types of advertisements. A land flowing with milk and honey. A land without a people for a people without a land. You could just copy and paste for Israel. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. And
this goes beyond just America. The overall age of colonialization, or the age of occupation, or whatever you could call it, was spurred on by these popes. Pope Alexander the sixth here, and earlier in 1952 with Pope Nicholas V. And he's saying, it has been your intention to induce the populations living in those islands and lands to accept the Christian religion. And then when they do this, when they go and conquer these lands, they will make a point and regard you as said heirs and successors, as their lords, with full, free, and all-encompassing power, authority, and jurisdiction. So subhanAllah, exactly the same thing that the Quran says. They want to influence these Native Americans and influence all of these indigenous lands around the world to be Christians, to get away from their heresies. And when they do, when they influence them to worship others with Allah, they become lords over them, and they become the tyrants over them. This is the Christian tradition that Allah mentions, in a nutshell. And this is what led to the conquest of the entire earth. And even in America, there was Johnson versus McIntosh. It was a Supreme Court case which used this doctrine of discovery in order to promote the conquest and the colonization of the Native Americans. So not only was this directly influential to like the Spanish and the Italian, Portuguese, and French empires, and just created a whole trend of colonization overall, but this was actually in some ways enshrined indirectly in American law and contributed to the American conquest of the Native American lands. And you can see now the map of all of these lands that were conquered, all of the lands of the earth. And on the title, I put the beast of the sea here, referring to a prophecy. Well, I believe it's a prophecy in Revelations, speaking about a great beast or a great empire with multiple heads, and each head had a crown. So it's a system, like an imperial system, which is composed of many different nations and many different rulers that takes over every nation and tribe on the earth and like suppresses them. And it says that they were even given power to defeat and overcome the believers. Who are the believers that the colonists overcame? Was it the Christians? Were they the true believers that the Bible is mentioning? I think it's the Muslims that were overcame by these people. And the Quran is saying, or the Bible, sorry, in Revelations, is saying that these terrible beasts will overcome the believers and take over all of their lands and force them to worship them. I wonder if the force to worship is a reference to white nationalism or white supremacy as well. Because it's saying they're forced to worship the image of the beast. I don't know if that's supposed to mean like white supremacy and worshiping whiteness, or what it could be referencing. Obviously, I don't put so much weight into what's preserved in the Bible and what's not, but I just find that pretty interesting. And everywhere that they went, they did the same things that they did, as I referenced, in America and as mentioned in the Bible. Of course, the worst of all is infanticide. Now, I mean, we're both fathers. And anyone who's a father, anyone who has friends with a father, a child falls just a little bit, you know? And it's like, it breaks your heart. You like care so much. It's just an instinctive care. How corrupted and how polluted of a person do you have to be to think that God wants you to murder children? That God thinks that you should be happy when you dash little ones against the rocks. Or in the case of Joshua, and of course we don't believe that Yeshua bin Nun was actually doing this. This is an innovation. This is a mythology. I forgot to mention that earlier. This is a mythology that they have. And even archaeologists and geneticists say that it was a mythology of complete destruction. It's like a foundational myth for their nation. But it says that Joshua devotes men and women, young and old, sheep and sheep and donkeys and oxen with the edge of the sword. Devoted it all to destruction with the edge of the sword. So is this the real prophetic way to deal with children? You know, we have human rights. If there's a child, you want to take care of it and bring it to like proper care. This is God's way. Which one is more beloved to God? Maybe some of the Christian nationalists can answer. Is it more beloved to God to smash a child against a rock? Or is it more beloved to God to bring a sword to a child? Which one is more,
compassionate?
Yeah, which one is closer to the mercy of God?
Christ-like.
Exactly. And the crazy thing is, and many people have pointed this out, many of the Muslim polemicists, is that they believe this is Jesus revealing this. This is the commandments of God, and it's a triune God who are all acting with inseparable operations, and they're all speaking in unison. So Jesus and the Holy Spirit are commanding infanticide. And guess what? People took those commands literally all throughout history. As you see on the right with the short account of the destruction of the Indies by Bartolomé de las Casas, speaking of the conquistadors in the Indies and like the Caribbeans, and he says that they forced their way into native settlements, slaughtering everyone they found there, including small children, old men, pregnant women, and even women who had just given birth, They hack them to pieces, slicing open their bellies with their swords as though they were many sheep herded into a pen. And then, just to show the connection here between the verses of the Bible and how that was played out in Christian history, in American history, well, the history of the Americas, is that they grabbed suckling infants by the feet and, ripping them from their mothers' breasts, dashed them headlong against the rocks. Others, laughing and joking all the while, threw them over their shoulders into a river, shouting, "Wriggle, you little perisher." So they are happy as they dash infants against the rocks. I wonder if their Catholic priests and parishioners had told them that verse whenever they sent them out to do this war. And they did it, in the center, you can see they did it in honor of the Savior and the 12 apostles. So another one of these human sacrifice cults based on these corruptions within the Bible that were added by the Jews in order to develop a founding mythology, because they wanted to separate themselves racially, not just religiously, but they wanted to create a racial separation from the Canaanites, which they were. They were the descendants of the Canaanites. Melchizedek, who Abraham came and learned from, was a Canaanite priest. And just like Islam, they accepted converts and they brought people in, and people would convert and get married. And there's they say now there's no genetic evidence or archaeological evidence of these mass genocides that occurred, because it's just a myth that they created and put in the Bible. But that myth has consequences throughout history whenever people follow it, and especially whenever people make it their political theory, when people have Christian nationalism. And then you have a leader who opens up the Bible and sees this and says, well, I got to do what you got to do. You got to do what you got to do. I got to bomb these babies. I have to blow up these settlements because that's what the Bible says. And if you wanted an example within the Anglo-American sphere, you can look at the Pavonia massacres, in which they also are explicitly said to have hacked babies to pieces.
Yeah, we see that with the bombing of a girls' school.
Exactly, yeah. They're still doing it right now. And there's also types of racism that came directly from the Talmud. Now, I'll be fair to the Catholics and the Orthodox. I don't think that they had this interpretation, but from the Talmud, and then within many early Protestant traditions, they had something called the Curse of Canaan. And I've actually debated people on these points, in schools growing up. They would have this belief that the black people were cursed by God to be the slaves, and it was wrong that the slaves were taken away, because this is the order of God.
That they were emancipated. That was violation of God's
law.
Yeah,
that's what they think. So you see on the left is the original curse. It's the Curse of Canaan, but they apply it to Ham. And in the Table of Nations, Ham was the Africans. And it's obviously so central, it's obviously an addition that was written by the Semitic people, because it says, "Blessed is the Lord God of Shem, let Canaan be his servant." And then whenever it's talking about the Europeans, it says, "May God enlarge Japheth and let him dwell in the tents of Shem." So God's blessing for the Europeans isn't give them beautiful land and fertile soil and all all these great cultures that Europe has. His blessing is, let him visit Shem, let him go kiss the wall.
Yeah.
That's the blessing of it. So it's obviously a addition later, but it's speaking about a type of race-based hierarchy system and enslavement system, which manifested with the president of the Confederacy. This was prevalent among many of the early colonists. But it actually they tried to establish it as a political, natural law, as one of the, fundamental rights of humanity, that they recognize the fact of the inferiority stamped upon that race by the Creator. And from cradle to grave, our government as a civil institution marks that inferiority. We recognize the Negro as God, and God's book and God's laws in nature tell us to recognize him, our inferior, fitted expressly for servitude. So this was the attempt at that time of Christian nationalism with the Bible and the Talmud, or Talmudic interpretations of the Bible as its basis. And there were, of course, many Jewish slave traders and traffickers at this time, and plantation owners. So there was definitely cross-cultural influence there. But again, with the Confederacy, people say, even many good intending people, I think they don't really want to accept the truth of the history. So they say oh, this was just about states' rights. It was just states' rights that they were fighting for. It was just because
Civil War.
Yeah, the Civil War was fought just because of states' rights. It was just because of this oppressive North, wanted to take away their rights. Which is okay, right to do what exactly? have slaves. And why did they want to do that? Have this, not just slaves, not just servants, but have a system of oppression, was because they founded their government. They say their government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid and its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. So that's their Christian nationalism at the time was intended to promote this idea and explicitly mentioned as the foundation of this idea. And then the whites have equality, but not so with the Negro. Subordination is his place. He by nature, or by the curse of Canaan, is fitted for that condition which he occupies in our system. Our confederation is founded upon principles in strict conformity with these laws. The stone which was rejected by the first builders has become the chief corner or the real cornerstone in our new edifice. So there's no way that you can argue that it was a states' rights issue. This is a Christian nationalism issue. And they're bringing their interpretations of the Bible to law in order to subjugate people and become, again, the lords over them by their strange ideas of the Bible. So this kind of represents many of the earlier sentiments that were brought to the forefront. It's the one above that, the Mormon. And in other areas, it came to the forefront as well. So there's another strange idea, the mark of Cain. They say Cain was sent out and he was given a mark. And they say that that mark was blackness. Many of the earlier Americans said that this mark was blackness. And then the Mormonism came along and they made it like, he's a prophet. And they gave it like this prophetic authority that actually we are the superior race. And they were, made by God to be ugly. And he put it in his revelations, which, are just most of the time just... Yeah, Joseph Smith put it in his revelations, which are most of the time just plagiarization or like kind of strange rants, that the seed of Cain were black. So this is the mark that was given to Cain, according to his ideology. And specifically, they might try to reference this, Mormons, and say like, oh, well, this is a different type of blackness than the blackness of the Africans. He's not referencing like black skin, like melanated skin. It's a different mark, given to them. This is their like reinterpretation. Because they're prophets, they change their book like every other day. So they try to reinterpret it. But in the bottom, he says, had I anything to do with the Negro, I would confine them by strict laws to their own species and put them on national equalization. So he's speaking of them as a totally separate species and saying that he wants them to be segregated in their societies. So, I mean, this is, of course, like a refutation of Mormonism implied, but it's also a refutation of much of the Christian nationalism at the time that came to a spearhead or got like some sort of prophetic authority through Mormonism, which is why it was able to be, such a big movement. And when they went and colonized their lands, Utah, it's literally Utah because it's the land of the Utes. That was their reservation. So they took their land from them and massacred them and, in order to create their Zion, their new Holy Land, which again is a parallel to what the Jews are doing. They're going and they're using all of these verses of Amalek and all of these things and Canaan and whatever else in order to justify their attacks on the Palestinians, to create their Zion, to create their promised land. So it's an exact one for one. It's not that the Jews are just hijacking, America or hijacking the American political system. It's that this was festering for so long in America that they found they had an ally. They had somebody who had the same ideas as them, and they were able to get their will by uniting with these people. And of course, whenever this happens, these people they end up being racist towards others. The rabbis, one of the chief rabbis of Israel, called black people monkeys. This was actually, I think, Netanyahu was a pallbearer for this rabbi. So he was somebody that looked up to this rabbi, and they had forced sterilization of Ethiopian women, even Jewish Ethiopian women, in Israel because of their racism. And you can't be a genocidal, maniacal society unless you're racist, unless you view them as actually inhuman. Not just we have a little bit different culture or we're raised differently, maybe I like my food and they like theirs. Maybe there's distinctions people make. But actually, they believe them to be a different species. They believe them to be like monkeys or cursed by God to be a subhuman and a slave and a vermin, yeah. And the bad thing is whenever they do this, if you accept this as happening to others, it's going to happen to you, just like Epstein is doing, or Epstein did, and the others did in America. And then with the Jews, this happened with the Holocaust, because Martin Luther was the godfather, the founding father of the Holocaust. In his book On the Jews and Their Lies, he speaks about setting fire to their synagogues and schools, razing and destroying their houses, and putting them into, like, terrible conditions, concentration camps, and then advising that their rabbis be forbidden to teach henceforth on pain of loss of life and limbs, so murdering people for their beliefs. This was Protestant Christianity, and this guy is celebrated in Protestant Christianity, even though he's the forefather of the Holocaust. He was called the great man of Germany by Hitler, and lionized in Mein Kampf. And how is it that Hitler took over the society? Was he just such a great speaker that everybody gave up all their morals and decided to follow them all at once? No, they were already thoroughly primed for this by the Protestant Reformation and by the teachings of Martin Luther. They were already told, the Bible says this is what you do. And John Calvin as well has, has exegesis of the Bible in which he's saying, this is good, you have to kill their children, as the Bible says, because then their children will just grow up and be, terrible people and pagans as well. So they're using the Bible, which interestingly enough is the Jewish Bible, and the Jewish corruptions and the Jewish editions of the Bible are coming back to bite them. But yeah, these people are still celebrated. Actually, in some churches, instead of Halloween, they celebrate Reformation Day, which is Martin Luther's day that he put up the 95 Theses on the wall. It's they celebrate this man who is the father of the Holocaust. I don't know if they realize. They realize that.
Well, some people watching the stock of Martin Luther might be going up in their eyes.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, for the Catholics who are now, I guess Nick is a neo-Nazi Catholic, even though Hitler didn't really like Catholicism too much. And then if all of this, I mentioned how there's like this festering, Christian nationalism and racism and fundamentalism in America. But the resurgence of it didn't occur until very recently, like 70 years ago. The father of conservatism was Edmund Burke, who was post-American Revolution, post-French Revolution, and had kind of a reactionary theory by which he wanted to preserve the monarchy, preserve hereditary monarchy. And he was anti-republicanism. Republicanism being one of the founding fathers' main points, that we shouldn't have a king or a monarch or a sole tyrant, that we should have a government that serves the people. And then that's why they changed the word to president. But his whole purpose was to preserve the oligarchic class system and actually reject the idea of absolute human rights, reject egalitarianism and equality, and had an idea, of course it wasn't called this at the time, but had an idea of Christian nationalism, that the state should be Christian, and that we have a Christian society that we need to represent, in Christian institutions, in the king and in the political party of the time. Then on the right, after World War II, this manifested in America with a certain William Buckley, who he's lauded by it's like Christianity Today and the Heritage Foundation. All these people have articles about this, the father of modern American conservatism. And what was he arguing for? Whenever he was taking the ideas of William Buckley and repackaging them, obviously he wasn't arguing for a king as Buckley or as Burke was, but he was arguing for the subjugation of blacks, and that the people in the South, the whites in the South, are the advanced race, and that they should be maintained as the superior, and they should be maintained, as you could say, the lords over these blacks. And that he rejected, just as I mentioned with Burke, he rejects the idea of universal human rights, and rejects the idea that there could be equality between blacks and whites. So in the American context, this came up specifically as a rejection of civil rights and the Civil War, the abolition of slavery. And this is kind of like the development of like the sixth political party system, because they use the word Republican nowadays while they're following the theology or the political theory of Edmund Burke, who is explicitly anti-Republican. He explicitly wants a king and an oligarchy. So they're using the word Republican, but they're really just conservative Christian nationalists. And Reagan was the first of these. And now we call the people who are like war hawks, we call them neocons, because they are following in this conservative tradition and trying to like revive this conservative tradition. And within our lifetimes, we can see this with the neocon George Bush, who in his briefings by Donald Rumsfeld, he would have Bible verses put on it about these going into, destroy the righteous nations, taking over the, the terrible nations or the pagan nations or whatever. And he would like have calls with priests and talk about like, oh, Gog and Magog, like the Muslims as Gog and Magog, like they're taking over. And the priest would have to like go call an American preacher, like, what is this guy talking about? Where is he getting these ideas? So he was able to use the Bible for his purposes. And the conquests, of course, these conquests are the conquest of the kingdom of God, which is the conquest of Islam. All of the places that Islam conquered, now they want to conquer. All the places that, the prophets in the Old Testament said would be taken over by the righteous, believers, they want to conquer. So they're using the Bible and trying to recycle these for the modern day. And subhanAllah, speaking of this, of course, I feel like I have to mention just the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how the nations will all go to war for the great treasure and the Tigris and Euphrates. And people will go and ask, is this what I killed for? Is this what I came here for? Is this what I cut family ties for? And I've seen this in my life with my friends who went to war, and they came back and they're crying to me in my room saying, we killed children. We would go hunt down little kids. We would go hunt down people in their villages and we'd murder them. And then we'd just take like an AK and throw it on their body, take a picture and say, oh, we got a terrorist. That was what they did in the tribes. Maybe they had tribes that they worked with who they didn't do this to, but then they had the tribes or the people that they were going against that they would do this to. And even now in this, I actually had to go back and add this note just like yesterday because I saw it in the news that there are 200 soldiers coming forward saying that the government is telling them that this war is for the return of Jesus. And this war is for establishing, like this...
war with Iran.
The war with Iran, yes. It's for the return of Jesus and for establishing this, nation of God here and all of this. So it's still this neocon objective is taking the Bible and recycling it so that way they can do their tyrannical like escapades all over the world. Neo-colonial escapades all over the world. And people will say, whenever I bring up all of these points about Christian nationalists or Christian nations, they'll say, oh, you're just cherry picking. You're just cherry picking, these examples. This isn't really Christian belief or Christian political theory. Well, my friend, when are you going to look around and realize you're in a cherry orchard? There's nothing but cherries to pick here in Christian history. As the founding fathers pointed out, it is the bloodiest religion known to mankind. It brutalized all of mankind, and millions died for the sake of this monster, for the sake of this three-headed dog of Hades, Cerberus. And I have compiled this list over my life in like dialogue or discussion of ones that I could try to find like, Christianity explicitly or Christian nationalism or Jewish values. For example, with Soviet Russia, that might be the only one that's kind of contentious point here. And that just depends on whether people accept the Bolshevik, Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy theory. Well, they call it a conspiracy theory. I'm not so sure that it was, especially now whenever you see somebody like Noam Chomsky trying to promote socialism while really under the table he's the best friend of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
There's your Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy theory here. But there is somebody, I forget where it was. It might be the University of Manchester or something. But there was a historian there who compiled a list of all of the people killed by all of the different religions and came to a similar number, somewhere between a fifth to like a quarter billion people killed by Christianity all throughout time. And including, of course, the recent ones, the American wars on Islam or the war on terror, and the American starvation in Iraq. Because, I mean, you can go and find the quote of Madeleine Albright where she's saying, oh, 500,000 children have starved, but this is a price we're willing to pay, Yeah. There's your Judeo-Christian, values. There's your Judeo-Christian civilization. Values. Yeah, she was maybe crypto Jew or something.
Yeah, she was Jewish.
Yeah, or by heredity, her genetics Jewish, but now, with all of this being said, it can seem like a lot of doom and gloom, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that they wish to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, but Allah will not allow except that His light should be perfected, even though the disbelievers may detest it. It is He who has sent His messenger with guidance and the religion of truth to proclaim it over all religion, even though the pagans may detest it. O you who believe, there are indeed many among the priests and the anchorites who in falsehood devour the sustenance of man and hinder them from the way of Allah. And there are those who bury gold and silver and spend it not in the way of Allah. Announce unto them a grievous penalty. So, subhanAllah, you see again, first of all, the principle that they try to attack Islam, and even if they are able to have a temporary victory, Islam will win in the end. They think they're doing a disservice to Islam, but they're only spreading Islam, both by the, spreading the Muslims around the world, pushing them out of their comfort zone and putting them into the world as essentially missionaries, but also now because the Muslims are the martyrs of the West. The Palestinians are the archetypical martyrs. The Palestinians have become like Jesus, or like the early Christians were for Rome, because this is how Christianity overtook Rome, was by having these martyrs who were kind of stoic and believed and said, we're not going to give up our faith. And that was inspiring to people. So now the Muslims have taken the position within the Western consciousness of the martyrs. And Islam will overtake the European and the American society as well. And then you see the last point is just similar to the lords over them, making lords over them, is speaking about the priests and the anchorites taking, hoarding the wealth and hindering men from the way of Allah. Again, just this prognosis of Christian civilization right there. Then in the next slide, you see what I mean whenever I say they thought that they would destroy the light of Allah, but the light of Allah is only going to, only going to grow and only going to be established. Is that now most of these countries, Europe and America, have a firm Muslim presence. I think in Houston we've got like 100 mosques, or well over 100 mosques. And some of these countries within our lifetimes are going to have like a quarter Muslim. And then once Muslims are, have their established communities, they're not just refugees, and they're able to do all of this effective da'wah, what happens whenever that quarter, on average, one person brings one person into Islam or more? What happens whenever that? Then you have a half. This is accounting for migration, birth rates, and things like that. But whenever you have conversion, once the Muslims are able to establish ourselves in the West, then you'll have even more. And back in the old days, the Muslims would do conquest, so that way we could establish a colony. We could establish, a palace and have an example for the people of what a Muslim society, like a utopian society, would look like. But in this case, they conquered the Muslims, and then the Muslims are able to establish our utopian societies and, establish ourselves as individuals within the Western society. So even without a conquest, Islam still wins, mashallah. And this...
Where's this, what's this dark spot in Utah? Have you ever been there?
That's in New Mexico right there?
Oh, New Mexico, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, I don't know. I think that's far east from Santa Fe. It maybe Santa Fe, but it might be a little bit too far east. Maybe there's a small town there that I'm not aware of. But there are, have you ever seen the Islamic, there's like a whole, Islamic retreat center there or something like that. Yeah.
But that's it's isolated. It can't be much population. No,
but there are, within Taos and Santa Fe, I've actually prayed at the masajid there. There are masjids there. And there are Muslim communities there. So even in random small towns, even some of these towns that there's no other Muslims, there's like a little Muslim shop. Like some Palestinian or Turkish guys selling like Turkish lamps and things. It's every single city, even small, like off the beaten path towns. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ said that that Islam will overtake Rome. He said we'll attack Arabia, and Allah will allow us to conquer it. We'll attack Persia. Allah will allow us to conquer it. And were these partial conquests? Did Allah give us half of Arabia, or like a quarter of Arabia? Did Allah give us half of Persia, or was it all of it? Of course, Allah gave the Muslims all of it. So whenever Allah says we're going to attack Rome, or we're going to conquer Rome, or maybe have a war with Rome, and then we will conquer it, is this half? Is this just the Byzantine half and not the Western half? Obviously, I think it's the full conquest prior to the Dajjal and the Antichrist, which the Muslims will conquer as well. And I hope for my sake and all of us, I hope that this is says that it's farther in the future. Yeah. I hope the Dajjal is not coming soon. I hope for us that our goal is to spread Islam here and bring Islam among the people of America, so that we can have a full Islamic populace and then Islamic government. But I don't know how quick things are going to progress. Only Allah knows the future. But our job, I'm not advocating for vigilantism and anything like this. Our job is to spread Islam among the people, and not only just the general da'wah for us living in the West, the general call to do da'wah, but also just as a Westerner. I think the best way to bring any kind of political theory or any kind of movement to the West is through the people, just by the culture of the West. So my job and all of our job is to go and not do terrorism or anything. Some people might take this the wrong way.
What?
There's a lot of crazy people out there who anything you say, they just automatically
they want to just clip it and say, "Oh, look, these two bearded guys are talking about conquest."
Yeah.
They want to.
But what's the way that we can bring Islam to Rome? Us who are living in the West, who are not on some battlefield on the other side of the world, is by being a good neighbor and being a good friend.
Or just preaching the truth.
Preaching the truth, of course. All of the different things that go into dawah, or living a lifestyle of dawah. And there's also a hadith. They say it's a da'if hadith, but there's a hadith where the Muslims will attack Constantinople and then they'll attack Rome in that order, like the city of Rome, and they'll conquer the city of Rome. So I'm not sure if that's like authentic or not, but within the overall paradigm, it seems like Rome will become Muslim, meaning the European world will become Muslim.
Inshallah.
And as we spread Islam and bring like our ideas to America, to the marketplace of ideas, we have our own political theory. We have our own theory of taxation and distribution, where the zakat, which is the taxation for the Muslims, is for the poor and needy, those who administer the funds, those whose hearts have been reconciled to the truth, for those in bondage and in debt in the cause of Allah, and for the wayfarer, ordained by Allah, and Allah is full of knowledge and wisdom. So you see the 8 categories of zakah here, and a perfect distribution model for essential taxation on wealth. And this really, if you're going to say that you have a country based on life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, how can you say that you have a country which guarantees the right to life whenever you can get cancer and die without getting treatment just because you're poor? Is that guaranteeing life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? Or is that actually excluding some people from life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? And the Islamic method, not saying that Islam is, like the ideal of the Constitution or the Declaration necessarily, but Islam is a guaranteeing life for people more by saying that zakat should be given to people who are poor and needy. And of course, in these groups are people who are sick. So the taxation is not for, billionaire tax cuts and billionaire corporate welfare. The taxation is for poor and needy. And that would be great if we had that in this society, if we had real life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in this society. And the antithesis of this, and I mentioned the neocons and the resurgence of conservatism, the wrong way of distributing money that the government gains is speaking here of ghanima, like the spoils of war. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as for the gains granted by Allah to his messenger and from the people of other lands, they are for Allah and the messenger, his close relatives, orphans, poor, and the needy travelers. And the point that he makes, the principle here, the political theory principle, I could say, is that so that it may not merely circulate among your rich. Whatever the messenger gives you, take it, and whatever he forbids from you, leave it. And fear Allah, surely Allah is severe in punishment. So to show the truth of what Allah is saying, you see, whenever these neocons, or the conservatives, whenever Reagan instituted his Reaganomics and trickle-down economics, what does that mean? That means tax cuts for the wealthy, corporate bailouts, and corporate welfare for the wealthy, so that it becomes a circulation among the rich, and then inequality grows because it doesn't trickle down. They just build a larger vessel to contain their wealth. Or as the Quran said in the other chapter, the priests and the anchorites, they hoard their wealth and they bury it. They don't use it. And I think burial is not just, maybe they did bury it in the ground at the time, but maybe there's also the principle of them hoarding wealth and keeping it away from circulation. And you see here, the inequality has grown in America since Reaganomics, since trickle-down economics, to the point where now it's worse than the French Revolution, worse than the Gilded Age, and more inequality than when they threw tea into the harbor because of taxation. This is the worst inequality that we've ever had. And it's specifically because of this conservative agenda, which is Christian nationalist, and their Reaganomics or trickle-down economics. And that's also what created this Epstein class, this twisted class who thinks that they're separate and above everybody else. They were pushed to such power that they were corrupted and to believing that they could do whatever they wanted. So subhanAllah, this is, maybe an Islamic critique of trickle-down economics or Islamic political theory in contrast with trickle-down economics.
Yeah, but you wouldn't call like that billionaire class, the top 1%, as Christian. Like most of them haven't been Christian nationalists. They've been like neoliberal. They've been, very like someone like Peter Thiel. Yeah, he will fund Christian nationalism, but he's like gay. He's like a gay guy who is a transhumanist
Oh
and
yeah.
has the kind of progressive understanding of the future. Or Elon Musk, even. Elon Musk is in no sense like, yeah, he might LARP as a Christian nowadays because it's socially popular, but he's lived his whole life as an atheist.
Oh yeah.
He's explicitly said he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't think it's rational. And they're,
Elon Musk.
yeah,
I think he
Elon
said he
Musk.
believes in the God of Spinoza.
Yeah, now he's just said that
Oh,
now,
maybe he
like
said that.
just
I don't
to
know.
like LARP as.
But that's the earlier quote from one of the founding fathers, I forget who, said that the despots and the tyrants find an
Auxiliary.
auxiliary in the Christian priests. So it's just like you're saying, these despotic, evil techno-feudalists find the Christians to be their, useful tool. And also the origin of the economics, I think, is Reaganomics, who was a Christian nationalist and and like the original kind of conservative. And then even now with Trump, he's branded himself as a Christian nationalist. He branded himself uh, in this way, and he's only furthering this divide and this inequality. So it's even though I know that the puppeteers, who are controlling the strings, are not Christians. I'm sure of that. You're correct. But the people that the puppets that they're controlling, all these pastors who are saying you have to vote for Trump, and you have like this is a like election. This is our duty of God that we have to support this man. There were many preachers and pastors who were saying that, and I have family who believe that this is like their duty by God is to support Trump.
Yeah, those are definitely a resurgence, but like if you look at the history of the 20th century in particular, like there's like the people in power are not really viewing their nation as a Christian nation.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like I think that you had neoliberalism, you had
definitely, yeah.
this kind of elite atheism, godlessness. I think that's maybe at the top 1%. Like that's more characterizing I think Christian nationalism in its current form is like something new. It's something that it's resurging like now as a reaction to all of that atheism, all of that liberalism, like woke, even like more in the past 5 years, like a counter reaction to woke liberalism. It was the woke liberals that, or who was funding the woke liberals? Like who's putting the rainbow, like their logo in the rainbow flag? Like all the major corporations, right? They're promoting LGBT, they're promoting feminism, they're promoting like
No,
the critical race theory.
You're right about that for sure. Two sides of the same coin, maybe in some ways.
Yeah.
Two horns of the same devil.
Yeah.
I'm speaking just of the economic theory here of
Sure.
Islam compared to the economic theory of kind of Christian nationalism. And then like I said, I used to love Ron Paul and read his books, and he always had like the taxation is theft. Well, in the Quran, there's no taxation on less than 5 camels, or like a walk of silver, or 5 certain amounts of grain. It's like, what is it now? And like $1,000, $2,000 is the amount,
yeah.
depending on if it's silver or if it's gold. So subhanallah, like imagine if I told somebody, oh, we're not going to tax you until your 5th car. Like that's like incredible. You can live your life, your house is not being taxed. I don't think there's property tax in Islam at any point. Why should you be taxed for your house? This is an injustice. How do you have life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness if you don't even own your own home? You have to pay somebody to live in your own home that you built, maybe. That's not life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's not these like great ideals of
income tax.
Oh yeah, all of these things.
Sales tax.
These
tax,
micromanaging our, I get $1.
Inheritance tax.
I get $1. You take 20% of it, and then I spend it, and you take another 8% of it. Micromanaging to take the most out of us, so that way they can hoard the wealth for themselves and give it among their people. So yeah, it's interesting, and in Islam there's also like maybe taxes for. I've read in some places they had, and I'd be interested in learning more from an Islamic economist. I'm woefully ignorant of this, but there's like either mineral rights are for the state and for the people that the money would be put back to the people, or if there was a private group that did it, it would be like a 20%, tax on it. In some places, like I think they would use it like the khums essentially for that as well. Or in the Ottoman system, I was just reading about this in preparation for this because I was interested in learning more about the Islamic economic system or various formulas of the Islamic economic system. They had a corporate tax that was also like a khums. And they had like guilds. They have like a guild tax for their partnerships or their corporations. So a lot of interesting things there to explore. And I am unfortunately not a faqih or a Islamic economist to speak about that. But just goes to show that Islam is a real political theory. Like Islam has political theory within it that is actually viable in the world. It's not just barbarians who are swinging swords. They're caricature of the Muslims and of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And on that exact point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have permission to fight explicitly. He says, close to the center, if Allah did not check one set of people by means of another, there would surely have been pulled down monasteries, churches, synagogues, and mosques in which the name of Allah is commemorated in abundant measure. And Allah will certainly aid those who aid His cause, for verily Allah is full of strength, exalted in might. So, subhanAllah, this is, in some ways, I'm not saying the exact one for one, but in some ways Allah is telling us to fight for the religious freedom of the Jewish and the Christian communities. That the reason for fighting, in some ways, is so that they don't get attacked for their beliefs. And Islam, of course, maintained this throughout its history. Because on the right here, you see, this is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of the oldest churches in Christianity, although it was built by like Constantine and his mom. This and the Church of Nativity. And then on the left, you have the, I think it's called Al Ghriba synagogue in Tunisia, the oldest synagogue in the world. So if you want to say that Islam is just going and like slicing people's throats and forcing them to be Muslim, well, why are they still there then? Why are these people still alive? If Islam was going and forcing, and if Islam didn't give them religious freedom. Those earlier Enlightenment, Unitarians recognized that Islam had liberty of conscience for, Jews and Christians and different denominations of Jews and Christians. And it's just historically true that they had a certain degree of ability to practice their faith in their places of worship without harm. So a real like better form of liberalism or freedom of religion is what Islam had, like not without the problems that you mentioned of Western liberalism.
Yeah, the religious freedom that is in Islam, like if you want to use that phrase of religious freedom, it wasn't a free-for-all. Like, okay, you have a traditional religion, you have a book, like your people of the book, you have the Bible, you have the Torah, and you can have your places of worship, you can raise your children upon that religion, you can teach it, you can have your rituals, you can have your holidays, you can have your meat, that's all protected. But it doesn't mean that, okay, you can become an atheist and you can start like blaspheming God and you can start like worshiping Satan, like openly being Satan worshipers. Oh, because we have religious freedom. Like, no, Islam didn't have that kind of liberal conception of religious freedom of anything goes. But it did have like tolerance for a different belief, even belief that is considered to be heretical and kufr and paganism, right? You can still practice. So that's the kind of religious tolerance.
Yeah, and on the next slide, I'll show that actually the Islamic idea of religious freedom is superior to the Western idea of religious freedom for the Christians and the Jews. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it is we who revealed the law to Moses. Therein was guidance and light. By its standard have been judged the Jews, by the prophets who bowed in Islam to Allah's will, by the rabbis and the doctors of the law. And in the second it says, let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah has revealed therein. And if any do fail to judge by what Allah hath revealed, then they are no better than those who rebel. So in the Islamic system, marriage, divorce, inheritance, business partnerships, like small civil litigation, this would all have been handled by your Christian authorities or your Jewish authorities. This wouldn't have been a Muslim coming and forcing you to accept their, beliefs in your life and in your marriage. This would actually be elevating those oppressed people. This elevated the Jews of the time, and this would elevate Christians who were under, non-Christian rule. And this is the epitome of like a small government, separation, in some ways separation of the Christian church and state, because Islam, of course, still had authority over the Muslims. But there's a separation of the Christian church and state because the state was not involved in the church and forcing them, for example, to promote gay marriage or forcing, you know, like I remember whenever I was younger, all these Christians were freaking out about a Christian baker being forced to bake a gay cake or something. And
yeah, I would freak out about that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just saying that the Islamic legal system would allow for somebody to have their own morals in their spaces without, you know, micromanaging. So it's actually greater.
It wouldn't allow gays to be gay in their own spaces.
No, but I'm saying for the Christians, if the Christians hadn't. But I don't know. I mean, maybe I've spoken to some people who said that if Christian churches had certain beliefs, like they were to regulate their marriage, what would Islamic jurisdiction be over the church?
But there's no homosexuality allowed.
Like
Ibn al-Qayyim makes it very clear, like
even in those cases,
because you have Zoroastrians, for example, Zoroastrians who were treated as Ahlul Dhimma, like the protected people, like as people of the book, even though they're Zoroastrian Majusi, and they have like mother marriage. And so is that allowed? No. Like you can't practice that even. So that it's not infinite tolerance. It's not tolerance for everything that you want to do. Certain things are just so vile that we don't even care that your religion says that you can do that. We're not allowing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And especially definitely in like a pre-medicine era. Like if you practice certain types of zina, certain types of adultery, you're just going to die of diseases.
Yeah,
that was happening even early in America. They were just all getting AIDS.
Yeah, like if there was a church that started allowing fornication or started allowing homosexuality, like that would not be allowed. Like,
right. Plus, the other Christian authorities would be able to converge upon them and keep them from doing that.
I made a mistake. Ibn al-Qayyim says that we don't have to regulate the Zoroastrians because incest is so disgusting that that's not something that would spread. Like it would just limited to these freaks basically. But when it comes to fornication or homosexuality, that's something that has the potential to spread because like it's a different kind of act. So those, even if the churches allowed that or the Jews allowed that, we would still restrict them from that. They couldn't practice that freely.
Yeah, I'm sure that's correct then. And in Islam, there's no right to do wrong, as you're mentioning. There's not a blanket right to do wrong, but there is a right to privacy. Unlike the inquisitors of the church, or unlike, you know, if you have spies or things in a modern sense, when Umar heard of people drinking in their homes, he initially broke in and then realized, wait, if they're in the privacy of their own homes, then we can't spy on them because Allah doesn't allow us to spy on them. And then with certain things like zina, if people are doing it in private, not in public, they don't have 4 witnesses, then it's very difficult to bring charges against them. There's like a whole oath process perhaps that they could go through or something with married couples. But there's no like breaking down your doors and figuring out what you're doing in your home. The jurisdiction is primarily in the public spaces unless there's some great harm coming to somebody in the private spaces. And maybe you understand the technical aspect of that more, but I just wanted to show, because a lot of people think that Muslims are just going to come and knock on their doors and like force everybody
it's not a one-to-one, because the privates, just because it happens in your home, that doesn't mean like you have immunity and the state can't bring charges, because there could be 4 witnesses in your home.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And the 4 witnesses in your home see this, and 4 male upright witnesses, and then they can testify, and the had would apply, the lashing or the stoning would apply. So it's not that same kind of public-private split that we see, or distinction that we see in American law.
Yeah, you know much more than I do about the technical side. I'm just thinking in general, people would think that Islam would come and like overtake society and destroy like their life and come and like force them into, you know, like in their private life, go into their home, force them into different things. This is what they think. This is like the ISIS idea of Islam. It's just going to come into their homes, and
it's coming from liberalism. It's coming from these founding fathers. Like that's what they're concerned about when it comes to the Trinity, right? From what you just presented, like the church actually dictating what you believe in, you know, in the recesses of your mind.
Yeah, and then just an ancient caricature of Islam.
Sure.
And our rules of engagement are also superior. As I mentioned so many points the Christian and the Jewish and the American rules of engagement, where they would, murder children. Allah subhanahu or Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said not to kill women or children or elders, and not to tear down fruit-bearing trees or destroy crops or destroy their buildings. This is exactly the opposite of what George Washington said, exactly the opposite of what the colonists did. And of course, in the Quran, on the right, if they ask for peace, you give people peace, unlike what George Washington and what the Bible says. And there's many other such things. But it's actually, even though people have this caricature of Islam, of being some like brutish, savage force that's just going to come and kill them, by our principles, Islam is superior to the West. And I'm not comparing apples to oranges, like, oh, well, we have, human rights, but Islam doesn't. Well, they don't actually have human rights in any of the cases that they've been able to exercise those human rights, like in their neo-colonial endeavors or things like that. So if we're going to compare apples to apples, like foreign policy to foreign policy, then you see Islamic foreign policy, Islamic rules of engagement are superior. There's no infanticide, no genocide, and that never happened in Islamic history from the Muslims, endogenous from within Islam. There's only two, maybe you know of more, but there's only two instances that people have brought up to me of Muslims doing a genocide, quote unquote. One of them is like the Young Turks, like the Armenian genocide. The Young Turks were also banning the adhan and banning Quran and banning hijab and trying to do like this secular liberal reform of Turkey. So that was explicitly anti-Islamic. And then the other one is like some of the Mongols who converted to Islam, like Timur the Lane. He did a genocide mostly against Muslims. And he was saying that he was like the, bringing the honor, like the inheritor of Genghis Khan. And he was like acting like a Mongol. So I think if you look endogenous to Islam, you're not going to find these genocides because it's explicitly forbidden in Islam. Unlike in Christianity, where you find so many examples of like large-scale mass slaughter.
Yeah, we don't have an Amalek verse. We don't have an Amalek verse. We don't have a dash, blessed are those who dash the infants on the rocks verse.
Oh, we have the verse of the sword.
Yeah.
Fight them if they fight you. Oh, if somebody attacks you, attack them. If they drive you out of your home, then drive them out of your home. And also, again, just a counterexample in Islam of the kind of conservative and Christian nationalist position. The Prophet, peace be upon him, explicitly says that there's no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, or a non-Arab over an Arab, and neither white skin over black skin nor black skin over white skin, except by righteousness. So isn't this judging people based on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin? How many years ago was this before that? Like over 1,000 years before this great Western ideal finally made it to the West. The West finally accepted that you judge people based on the content of their character. And the Prophet ﷺ was saying that well over 1,000 years ago. And this is not only theoretical, but practically in Egypt, we have a lot of like great genetic data. And there are great studies that have been done on the makeup of the Egyptians over time. And you see from the pharaonic Egyptians to the like later Egyptians under Greece and Rome, you see ethnic homogeneity. Even though they had black slaves and they had Nubian colonies and things like this, but it wasn't until after 700 CE that this black subgroup became mixed with the general population. And it's funny because these articles, these science articles, they'll say in the post-Roman era. What does the post-Roman era have to do with it? Why is it Roman-centric? It's not that Rome left and then they were not racist. It's that Islam came and then they decided they realized that they could, intermarry with other people. So there's also, I think part of this was kind of going against the black tracking, no population replacement. So I think they're kind of arguing against the point that the Arabs came in and just genocided all of the original black Africans, as some people would say.
Yeah, they really mixed a lot.
And then lastly, the Islamic systemic equity, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, that you may know each other, not that you may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous of you, and Allah has full knowledge and is well acquainted with all things." So, subhanAllah, I see here a few things. Firstly, the recognition of male and female, which can kind of avoid the imbalances of like pure, you know, like actual misogyny or pure actual misandry, and you know, have an equitable system, recognizing the differences and accounting for the differences between male and female, not setting them up as 100% equals in all things, but that women have a role as mothers and as caretakers and providers, and it's natural to them. That's the natural law, you could say, of their being, and that men have a role to go out into the world and, you know, do business
And be the
and
boss.
defend and do and to be a boss as well, to be the to be an authority, and then also that with nations and tribes, I think it's interesting. Allah mentions nations and tribes because this kind of sociological paradigm is kind of lost in America or in Western consciousness, especially, you know, because they wiped out all of the tribes. But imagine if the Muslims came to America and found the Native Americans and said, you have your tribal rights, you have your own version of private property. That was a big dispute between them. They would go kill all their buffalo and say, well, this isn't your property. So they have an understanding of you have your communal or tribal property and tribal lands and things like that, and we have our cities and our settlements. And then you're able to do trade and deal justly with them. And this is what happens with the Bedouins across the Muslim world when Islam spread. They had a proper system of how a national group, a civilizational or, you know, sedentary city, you know, dwellers would deal with the tribes. So this is within American history. You can see what happens when they don't have this understanding, this sociological and political understanding that Islam gives us. And then also now with Republicans and Democrats, you have the urban-rural divide. Rural areas, mostly Republican. Urban areas, mostly Democrat. And it's not just because of, you know, different religions or different, you know, like political theories. It's also just because you have a different set of needs when you live in a city versus whenever you live in the country. You have a different way that you want your society and your town to be regulated. And that's understood within Islam, that you have nations and you have like tribes. And in this case, of course, I'm comparing small towns to tribes. It may not be exactly a one-to-one, but there's an urban-rural divide within politics that I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions here in this verse of the Quran. And the other last point, and I think this is a great point to end on, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks about male and female and nations and tribes so that we may know each other. And whenever you are a man and you love a woman, you're attracted to them, you're enamored by them, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful experience. And whenever you're a person and you encounter another culture and you find their art and you find their traditions and you find the mindsets that they have, you know, the way that their family is or different things, there's a beauty to it. There's like a novelty to it. And I think the juxtaposition of these two things together is just like, subhanAllah, incredible. Because Allah compares the two, or puts them both in the same category, and tells us that the purpose is to know each other, rather than being like a xenophobic, exclusivist, you know, and like racist towards other nations, thinking that people of other nations are inherently evil, or that their culture is altogether inherently evil, just because they're different from you. You could, I mean, I understand critiques of other cultures, or saying, you know, like, oh, the French are like this, like Montesquieu. I'm trying not to speak about the French too much, but the French are like this, or, you know, like certain elements of black culture or certain elements of white culture or certain, you know, subgroups of different cultures. They have their own maybe pros and cons. But overall, the purpose is to know each other and to interact beautifully. And that's what we see with Islam. As I mentioned in the very beginning of this, that you have all of these nations who hated each other, tribes that hated each other for years, that came together under one banner of Islam and formed a system which was greater than the sum of all of their parts. And inshallah, that's what we can see in the world as the Islamic message, or as the message of the Quran spreads, and as these elements of Islamic political theory take hold in the West. So may Allah bring that within our lifetimes, inshallah.
Inshallah.
I guess we'll get to super chats now.
Sure. Let's thank you for that presentation.
Speaking of the chats, first thing I want to mention, we did not plan to dress the same. I always wear gray t-shirts, and I thought this was a little bit classic. So I put it on, and then I realized once we got in front of the camera that we are actually twins today. So
yeah, it's okay. We don't have like...
The color is different in person. I don't know if the camera catches it. This is gray, and his is black. So... It's on the camera.
No, this is navy blue, actually.
Oh, is it navy blue? See, I can't even see in person. So we're not totally twins. It's just maybe the camera that makes it look like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, super chats.
So we're only
from
gonna take super
YouTube?
chats that are related to the topic. But if you have a comment, we'll also look at the regular commentary as well. So we have PA Hunter says, "Make America monotheist again."
I agree. Inshallah.
He says, "Christian nationalists mad the Constitution doesn't say Jesus."
And it explicitly was they tried to bring it in, and like Jefferson and others explicitly avoided using it in like Virginia, the in their Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and others.
Local priests condemn that and the Pope.
Now this is true. Whenever he's talking about the what happened in the Indies, my point wasn't saying that the Pope did this. I was saying that Christians who had the Bible did this, and they did this in a lot of places that they went. Of course, like I give credit where credit is due, and the Pope and the Catholic Church did condemn like the what's his name, the explorer Christopher Columbus did condemn Christopher Columbus and many of the conquistadors. My purpose there was saying that when Christians in another land, they're looking for a moral guidance in life on what to do in the situation that they find themselves. You're not going to find rules of engagement in the words of Jesus. You look toward the Old Testament and you find the rules of engagement, which is consistently, from the Torah all the way until Samuel, a message of murdering the innocents. And I don't think that you can avoid that. But yeah, the definitely some certain elements of the church, the Pope, and in the Orthodox tradition, I don't think they have as much of this as well. Muslim pirates attack the fathers because of Islam. There's what's his name? Paul Williams. I reference his channel a lot because he's just, mashallah, he's got a great channel. But he has a video on the Barbary pirates or the Barbary corsairs. And I think what he's showing through his work, or through his quotations, is that this was, first of all, an inherited conflict. It wasn't just because of Islam that they attacked the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers inherited this conflict from the conflict that was happening between Spain and the Moors. So who were the Barbary people? They were the North Africans. And then who were they having wars with? Mainly like Spain and these others, who had just did a huge genocide and ethnic cleansing campaign against the Muslims with the Spanish Inquisition. So these are people who were driven out of their homes, I believe either within their generation or within their parents' generation, and then they're having active battles back and forth with Spain. And Paul Williams in that quote from a historian speaks about how they came to Morocco or Algeria or these places, and they razed entire cities, burnt them down, and it was just like this terrible like Gaza level of destruction, as he calls it. And so it's not that they attacked the Founding Fathers specifically because of Islam, or that there was a conflict with them because one was Christian or one was like non-Muslim and one was Muslim. It's that there's an inherited European and Islamic world animosity at the time, specifically because of the Spanish Inquisition and the wars that were happening prior to then. So maybe it's blowback. Maybe America just got in the way of the blowback, if you want to use the modern term.
I mean, they were doing a lot of slaving. Like the Founding Fathers were doing a lot of slaving, so it's like a weird standard to use, even if like without your explanation that you just gave.
Oh, like, true. I think Brother Arsalan was saying something about that the other day. That there was like I don't remember the context exactly, but he was saying that there was a Muslim like leader who said like the way that they're treating their slaves is so bad we have to attack them because they're treating their slaves so bad. So that might have been during this time. I'm not sure. Yeah. I haven't studied that part of history too much. I'm pretty ignorant about it.
Okay, so that is the super chats. Thank you everyone for watching and commenting. Thank you, Brother Isa, for that very enlightening presentation. I learned a lot of material. I know I'm going to go back and see and read more of those quotes, inshallah, to better understand. So I really appreciate you. But I think that this is, one of the main conversations of our time, the future of the Western world as these countries become more and more nationalistic and they become more xenophobic. And they want to claim a certain kind of national essence. That becomes a big part of nationalism and populism. Like, who are we? Like, where are we from? Like, what is our heritage? And there's just a lot of projection. There's a lot of inaccuracies. And it's not just in the West, in the East as well, like Iranian nationalism, Egyptian nationalism, Syrian nationalism. And there's these myths that are created that don't really have a basis in fact. And you need to have a researcher, academic, a historian to come and actually say, well, actually, you know, this idea that you have, like the U.S. was a Christian nation. It was founded upon Christianity, and the founding fathers were devout Christians. You have to have someone to come and show you the evidence, what is true and what is false, what's an exaggeration, what's a myth. And that's really the purpose of having this kind of conversation with Brother Isa. I really appreciate everything that he showed us. I really learned a lot. I think you guys will learn a lot as well. Just let us know what you think about all this in the comments. Give us your thoughts. Don't forget to like the video as well. Subscribe to the channel. And inshallah, we'll have Brother Isa on for more of these deep dives. Really appreciate his contribution. Jazakumullahu khairan. And inshallah, we'll see you on the next live stream. Bi-idhnillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.